Good afternoon, and welcome to the June 27th Governance and Priorities Committee meeting. I'd like to first recognize that we're on the traditional territory of Nanaimo First Nation. Our clerk today will be Ms. Sheila Gurry. Today's Governance and Priorities Committee meeting will be held in accordance with the Community Charter and Council Procedure Bylaw 2018, number 7272. The question period sign-up sheet is on the table by the double doors to my left for agenda items only. If during the meeting any member of the gallery has a question regarding an agenda item, please write down your name and the agenda item on the sheet. Members will be granted the authority to join meetings electronically. Today, we have the following councillors attending electronically, and I believe Councillor Thorpe is the only one.
That's correct, Chair.
Thank you. The first item on the agenda is the introduction of late items, and Ms. Gurry, do we have any?
No late items, thank you, Chair.
Okay. And then the next item is a motion to adoption of the agenda. Moved by Councillor Armstrong, Mayor Thorpe seconding. Any questions? None. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. And the next we have motion for the adoption of the minutes as circulated. Councillor Hemmons and Councillor Bonner seconding. Any questions? You were just wanting to vote, Councillor Martin, right? Okay, good. You're really fast there. All in favor? Carried. Now we turn over to Ms. Gurry for agenda planning.
Thank you, Chair. For Governance and Priorities Committee agenda planning today, on page 10 of your agenda package is the starting page of that document, and it has upcoming meeting topics scheduled for today's meeting that Council had on their priority list, as well as July 11th. We have Street Entertainers Bylaw and the Noise Bylaw scheduled to come, and that was the last item on your list of topics to be dealt with at the GPC meetings, and some of the items were dealt with in other formats, whether it be finance and audit or council meeting dealt with one of the issues, I think just at your last council meeting. So that is it for scheduled priority topics. And so with that, there is one other meeting in July the 25th, and staff don't have items currently for that meeting. So we were looking to see if council would be amenable to possibly canceling that one with no items scheduled. And that would leave the one in September to have any follow-up on items that still need to come before you for GPC matters. So your thoughts on that or any other topics that you would like to see, but right now we don't have anything scheduled for the 25th GPC meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Gurry. Councillor Bonner, is this left over from our trial? You're on the speaker's list. Thank you. I didn't want to remove you impolitely.
Sorry, Councillor Bonner, I forgot that.
It's okay. Are there any comments, suggestions?
I would just follow up to Councillor Bonner had an item that he wished to include at the last Governance and Priorities Committee meeting, and I said I would get back to him on that as to where the best venue and or meeting type to discuss it would be. And it was on new natural gas connections and the STEP code, which is part of the Environment Committee's work plan. So I talked to Councillor Bonner about that, and that is being dealt with at the Environment Committee, and then anything coming from that will come to the council meeting.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Gurry. We have Councillor Armstrong. Sorry.
I'm just wondering if we should look at doing a review of the GPC to see the effectiveness and non-effectiveness.
Chair, through you to Councillor Armstrong, that would probably be a really good idea to maybe wrap things up in September with that last GPC scheduled meeting before the election. But as well, I think for the new council, whether it's no one new or one of you new or however many, it will be a matter of discussion once the new council starts as well. So we could touch base on that in the September meeting and then as well after the new council term.
I just think it would be good to hear different people's perspectives of how well it worked, how well it didn't work, etc. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Armstrong. Mayor Krogh, you don't show up on my list here, but I see your mic is on.
Thank you. Apparently there's a technical difficulty with me getting any service over here, including being able
Welcome
to
to my
phone.
world.
Now I know how you feel over here, Councillor Turley. Chair, my view is that we have enough meetings and getting us together costs money, takes up staff time, et cetera, unless we have something meaningful, I see no reason to have a meeting and where we're trying to fill it with something. It's just not a very good use of time or taxpayers' dollars, for what it's worth. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Crowe. Any other, I don't see anybody on the speakers list, so do you have anything for Ms. Gurry?
Yes, so I will go ahead and probably send out a cancellation notice for the July 25th GBC since we don't have anything scheduled. Just thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is economic health and the current construction market conditions. And Mr. Sims, I believe you're going to do the introduction.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. This is a familiar tale to Council. This is the market uncertainty continues, and we just thought we would take the opportunity to bring yet a further update for the public and for Council, and also to demonstrate how staff are responding to those projects that are sort of caught up in this uncertainty. I think one of the watchwords that we have here is really flexibility and trying to be proactive and anticipate where things are. One of our project managers said this is just like a great big shake-up. The market's just been shaken up and we're still in that sort of feeling of uncertainty. At some point, we anticipate that it'll settle down and be a little more stable once again. But it's hard to see that at the moment. It's a brief presentation, but of course, we welcome questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sims. So yeah, every year we usually get in front of council with an update on capital projects, and this year we're going to be a little different and let you know what we're seeing in the construction market. As Mr. Sims mentioned, it's very unusual and it's difficult to predict. And these are just a couple of news stories that's happened over the last 6 months. In January, inflation was 4.8%. In May, it was 6.8. I saw another news story just last week saying it's 7.7, around there. And one of the challenges is our budgets are developed with cost estimates well in advance of a year. So a year ago at this time, inflation at this rate that we're seeing right now wasn't necessarily being talked about, it wasn't predicted, and so now we're adapting to those rising costs. A graph that's probably quite familiar, Mr. Sims has shown it a couple of times, just showing the very predictable over the last 10 years increase in construction costs around 2-3%. And then ever since about mid-2020, that curve has gone vertical, and the costs have risen quite a bit. We're seeing certain aspects even more than others, like steel, for instance, is up 65%, petroleum's up 44%. And then across Canada, so this isn't just a local problem, it's across the country, construction's up 16 to 20%. So how does that impact us? So this is a graph I pulled from a presentation to council a couple of years ago, kind of showing our overall capital program. A few projects are over budget, a few projects are under budget. Usually we ended up about 5% under budget, and we could manage that quite effectively. This is what we're seeing this year. So this is everything we put out to market since the fall of last year. And the previous graph was entirely like the entire project cost, start to finish. This is just budget versus bid price, so it doesn't account for anything extra after the project has started or other costs outside the construction contract. So most of our projects are coming in substantially over budget. You've seen a lot of these at GPC meetings and or Finance and Audit Committee meetings over the last few months. So I had a really great conversation with the Vancouver Island Construction Association to understand their perspective on why we're seeing increased costs, and really the core of the matter comes down to these three components. Increasing operating costs, that's the inflation, that's the gas prices when you're running heavy machinery and that type of thing, and how much it costs. We're still reeling from the supply chain disruption during COVID, still having difficulty getting certain components and products in a reasonable amount of time. That's causing projects to take longer, costs to go up, that type of thing. And the other piece is, even before last couple of years, we've been dealing with a skilled labor shortage in construction, and that's amplified now with a booming market, difficulty finding people. One of the areas that we're finding it really acute is in concrete work. One of the first indications of this was back in March. We called one of the local contractors to see if they could price a small project for us, and they said, if we can, we'll price it for you, but we're scheduling out in October. So they had their entire calendar throughout the summer booked already in early spring. So these are the issues that we're seeing locally that impact this as well. So how are we dealing with that? Well, before this was even front and center, there was a few projects that we just looked at from a staff perspective that we couldn't deliver this year. So as part of the budget process, those were deferred to 2023. And then there's 3 significant projects that have been impacted by this. The first one being Albert Street. When we were about to put it out to market, we looked at the cost estimate that was updated with the current market conditions. We looked at the market capacity to deliver it, and we just saw that there wasn't it was really unlikely we would get competitive bids or many bids at all because of the timing of the work. So that one's been paused for now, likely go back out to the market maybe in fall or winter for a spring-summer construction next year. Midtown Gateway was planned for construction this year and next year, so some of the budget was in this year, some of the budget was in next year. And again, looking at it, it looked like if we put the whole thing out, it was going to be over budget again. So we cut it in half to make sure we get the water supply piece of it that's connected with the Midtown water supply constructed this year. So that was put out to market, and even though we did our best, it still came in over budget. So there's going to be a full report on that next week at council. Terminal Avenue Phase 1, another project that was supposed to happen this summer. And again, between the costs and the market conditions of getting people out there to do the work, this one required night work, and we just thought the response was just not going to be there for this year. So, and on top of those, there's a few projects for a variety of reasons that are also being deferred into next year. Some for the market conditions, other for schedule or other reasons. And so that totals about $3.5 million. And so looking into the future, what can we expect? We've been working with cost consultants on some of our larger projects, and their world is construction costs and trying to understand where the market's going and that type of thing. So they've given us some pretty good advice on what to expect for the next couple of years, but this is the escalation that they're telling us that we can expect over the next few years. So quite a bit different than the 2 to 3% that we were used to. And then finally, we're using this information to develop the next round of financial plans, making sure that escalation is in there, and we'll be back at council in the fall during budget discussions for more information. And that's it. If there's any questions, I'm happy to take them.
I believe Mayor Krogh has a question.
Thank you very much, Chair. If I may, the general topic, supply chain issues, I mean, you hear it all the time. But with respect to the construction industry generally and the kind of work that we put out contracts to do, is there any particular nation or aspect of it that's narrow? I mean, just to say supply chain issues, I mean, is it because they're requiring things from 100 countries, or is it a local, in other words, Canadian problem? Is it because China's fallen behind? Is it because shipping's become expensive? I mean, did you get any kind of comment from those involved in the industry, what they see as if there is a main source, so to speak, of the issue?
So through the chair to Mayor Krogh. We're finding it in surprising places. Some places it's fine where the wait for components is what it used to be. Other places, it surprises us how long it waits for an electrical component or something like that. Anything with a chip in it takes a long time, as we've noticed. Pipe continues to be an issue, especially larger pipe. That's taking quite a bit of time. So and every once in a while, there's these specialty components. Anything specialty that's just not off the shelf is difficult to come by.
And if I may, Chair, in terms of pipe, where is it usually acquired? Is it an American product? Is it a Canadian product? Is it an Australian product? Is there any particular country or nation or jurisdiction that supplies more than others? And
Yeah, to the Chair, to Mayor Krug, that's an interesting one, because when you trace back the supply chains on these things, often you come back to one or two sources. For instance, last year we were dealing with a PVC pipe shortage because there was a plastic resin issue, and all of the pipe suppliers got their resin from a certain spot. So a lot of these have a connection back at the source. So that's, we get a lot from the U.S., we get some from overseas, and everywhere seeing challenges. And I think it's also connected to labor shortage as well.
if I may, I think what you're telling me is there's not some nice, even relatively simple answer, explanation. It's far too complex. It just strikes me that, you know, Canadian manufacturers should see what's happened in the last few years as an opportunity. And if you can make it at home, so much better for the planet, saves transportation costs, promotes your own economy. And I would think with all these supply chain issues, which are becoming obvious, and particularly given the burgeoning construction industry, and if governments respond appropriately over the next few years, given the number of housing units that are needed, clearly it's going to be a significant source of employment. And it just surprises me that some manufacturers, entrepreneurial types, haven't caught on to it at this point. Anyways, thank you. I appreciate your answers.
Mr. Sims.
Thanks, Chair. Just further to His Worship's point and Mr. Stewart's answer, I think we're seeing those complexities and those individual little components like resin or paint creating disruption all through, like just similar to the auto industry where we've seen, you know, computer chips all of a sudden sidewind every car that you'd wanted, that 2 years ago you could have wandered in and had your pick off the lot. We saw paint disrupted as a result of the cold weather or the ice storms in Texas a year and a half ago, and now we can't get paint, or we're just starting to get it now, and just little things like that. A lot of the raw materials do come from North America, but a lot of them do come offshore as well. Like steel is one that comes offshore, and that's that uncertainty. A couple of other factors that we're aware of as well is that, you know, as part of the pandemic, there was this huge dumping of money into the economy, granting and let's build projects, let's keep it going, which was good. But now it's created this huge, you know, everybody's trying to get the work done, and the labor shortage, kind of already starting to shrink, is now spread out trying to do all these projects. So everything from building a house to pouring a sidewalk to laying pipe is affected. It's a highly complex supply chain issue, as His Worship points out.
Thank you, Mr. Sims. In order, we have Councillors Armstrong, Hemmons, and Martman. Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. Is there anything that we can be doing with VIU to encourage more people to enter the skilled laborers pool or training? I know that the Government of Ontario is spending millions of dollars to do that. Is there something that we as a city could be doing?
Through the chair to Councillor Armstrong. So the city has been participating with VIU in their curriculum development committee for their engineering and their technologist program. We've been doing that for a number of years to help guide them in terms of being able to develop graduates that are suitable for the local sort of technical market in terms of engineering, construction, like that kind of thing. So we've been doing that for a number of years with VIU.
Are we encouraging like them to do more co-ops, which a lot of the new people like, versus just going to school and not doing the co-ops?
Certainly the city hires co-op students on a regular basis. My understanding is we haven't hired a co-op from their program yet. Their program's fairly new, so they haven't actually had a chance to graduate people through the entire program yet. They're in the process of developing them, but we speak to them on a regular basis about whether or not they have students that would be suitable for our needs. But quite often we hire students from UVic that have a connection to Nanaimo in some way. Family, or they're from here, or what have you.
Thank you.
Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you, Chair. I'm curious, this is a great report. I like being made aware that projects are going over budget and by how much and why. I think that's really good information to have in front of us, potentially, and I say us, the council redoing their budget. Where I'm curious is that as we begin to move projects around, when is it a strategic decision? And when does council come in and say this project over that project? And when does it remain in the department as completely operational?
Take that, Mr. Sims.
Through the chair to Councillor Hammond. So I think what I heard was, when do staff and when do council get a chance to make decisions to change course on a project if it comes in over budget? So the way we have historically done things is we have a certain sort of financial limit within staff under the oversight of the Director of Finance to move money from one project to another. And if it fits certain criteria, the project has to be substantially complete, and it has to be under a certain dollar figure threshold. And what we do with those is we have the latitude to move the money between the projects to make them work. And then I believe it's every quarter or periodically, those get disclosed in bulk to council. Mm-hmm. Now, when we have a project that has a funding requirement that exceeds that, then we come to council with a specific decision report for council to allocate funding to move that project forward. And so council would see those and be able to make a decision on those. When it comes to like a much bigger discussion around priorities and things like that, that would normally happen as part of the annual budget process. So we're anticipating that council's going to want to engage on that as part of the budget preparations throughout the summer and the fall. So we're sort of anticipating that, but that's our expectation.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, and building on that, I understand that this will come back before us in the fall or during budget discussions. But when we're talking, everything here is about percentages. But there's a difference between having 20% growth on 100,000 and 27% on $1 million. Will we actually have the dollar figures there to show what this project is in dollars and what it would go over?
Through the chair to Councillor Marmon. So the intention of this presentation was to provide a bit of an overview for council to kind of like that 30,000 foot level. When it comes to specific projects, we'll have reports for council and they'll have specific numbers and percentages and the details that I think you're looking for.
Okay, thank you.
And Councillor Thorpe, I'm not sure how, this isn't the appropriate way of putting it, but how do I turn you on?
Oh, no. Thank you, Chair. Appreciate being recognized, and I apologize for my rough voice. Yeah, I appreciate the report, and I guess my response or reaction to it is we've already been told previously that we have more projects in the queue than our city staff can handle in the foreseeable future. Now we're being given firm assurance that inflation is going to continue at a very high rate. Construction costs are up, supply chain issues continue to be a real problem. I'm going to suggest that looking ahead, this council and more likely the incoming council, I suggest are going to need to have a very close look at all of the projects that are in our queue, re-examine all of them to see which of them are must-have projects related probably to our infrastructure, and which of them are, as I think the chair would refer to as nice-to-have projects, because our taxpayers are hurting. Cost of living is way up, and all of these projects with increased costs are going to come back down onto the taxpayer. So I think there's going to have to be some hard decisions made down the road, and that's just the reality of this. This is not like a depression where we can spend our way out of it. I think we really have to set some or a future council will have to set some priorities about where the limited pool of our tax money is going to be spent. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thorpe. Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Chair. Similar to Councillor Thorpe there, on this point, I sort of agree that we need to, I think, have a reassessment of what's coming down the pipe, so to speak. I guess the question it comes into my mind is we already made this 10 or 20-year plan, It was already budgeted, money was already found, it was all taken care of. If nothing had happened, it would have just carried on. So what's happening now is inflation is more than staff has anticipated, therefore the budgets and the ability for contractors to do the work seems to be limited. So that basically drives the price of these things up. Has it ever been an option that we start looking at these things? Okay, this thing's coming in at, say, I'm just pulling a number out of here, $3 million over budget. Maybe we could do it ourselves, or maybe we could find a different way of doing it. Like, and say, you know, horrible things happen down south, and now they're into a civil war or whatever, which would not surprise me a second. And all of a sudden, our all of this thing is cut off. Are we just going to stop laying pipe? So, like, what are our long-term plans? And I guess the other thing is, if we're building less, how is that affecting staff's capacity? Because I wouldn't assume that you've made this 10-year plan without the ability to actually implement it. So if we're not implementing all of it, what are we doing about staff capacity in that front?
Okay, through the chair to Councillor Bonner. So I'll start with the last one first, because that's, so as these are kind of coming through, the decision, the strategy, I guess, has been to let's get these projects ready to go and on the shelf. So we're continuing with the design process. We're continuing with and some of the ones that are looking a bit over budget. We're continuing to work on them and seeing how we can bring costs down. Maybe a little bit of value engineering, that type of thing. On some projects where we've been able to use a negotiated RFP process, we're working with the contractors to do constructability analysis and reviews to say, hey, maybe there is a different way to do this that might be a little more efficient or a little better, or there's a different material that we can use that's maybe more locally available or not subject to supply chain and delays and stuff like that. So those are a couple of things that we're doing to kind of address those concerns. At the broader scale of where the material comes from, we really depend on industry, our suppliers, to develop options for us, I guess, of where we can come from. And we want to make sure things also meet our spec, right? So making sure we have those quality products from a variety of sources.
Okay, thank you.
There's nobody else on the speakers list, unless somebody wants to, no? Okay. If that's the case, then thank you very much, Mr. Stewart, Mr. Rosen, and Mr. Sims. Next on our list is Community Wellness and Livability, and this to be introduced by Mr. Lindsay.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair, Council. I'll just give a moment for staff to do their changeover here. This afternoon, the bulk of the GPC this afternoon was to be set aside to talk about affordable housing, and we have two reports on your agenda this afternoon. One is the report I think you've become familiar with, and this is our third time back in front of you giving you an annual update on the implementation of the affordable housing strategy. So we have a report on that. And then we have a second report on to talk about some potential measures or steps that the city, the council could take at looking at supporting affordable housing. Of course, we want to be seen as doing everything we can, pulling all the levers possible to support affordable housing across the community. And there's some suggestions here in the second report that I'll have some more to say on before we get into that item. I'd like to turn it over to Ms. Wood, who is our social planner, who will take you through the update on the affordable housing strategy, the implementation update. And then also acknowledge we have a couple of speakers that have joined us this afternoon. Andrea Blakeman's here, and I wanted to thank her in advance for participating and presenting to council and she's of course from the Nanaimo Affordable Housing Society. Your Worship, I also have, through the chair, we also have Mr. McEwen from BC Housing, who was originally unable to attend until 3 o'clock. So I'm just trying to get an update from him as we speak. If for any reason that we get to the point in the meeting where he's not available, we'll suggest we can move on to the second report and then we'll take a look at after we get through that item and circle back where we are in terms of time and if he is available. I do think it would be helpful to hear from Mr. McEwen to get an update on BC Housing's projects and initiatives they have in going on in the community, the many initiatives they have going on in the community. So we'll do our very best to try to get him in before the end. So, but we'll see how the afternoon goes a little bit on that one. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Ms. Wood and get us started on the afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm really excited to be here to present to you guys an update on the 2021 Affordable Housing Strategy. My first time in this capacity, so lovely to see everybody. As Mr. Lindsay indicated, I'm going to be providing you with an update on the implementation status of the strategy and the policies and actions that are outlined there, as well as other projects that the city has been engaged with to support affordable housing. So I think it's just a good idea to start with a bit of a review of the policy objective categories that are actually in the affordable housing strategy. And they came about through consultation and research that, that council and staff did back in 2018. So there's 5, and the first one is to increase the supply of rental housing. The second one is to support infill intensification in existing neighborhoods, diversify housing form in all neighborhoods, continue to support low-income and special needs housing, and strengthen partnerships and connections. Oh, there we go. My button's not working. Oh, there we go. Sorry about that. I think this is an important discussion to have because sometimes affordable housing can mean different things to different people in different contexts. So Canadian Mortgage Housing Corporation, as many of you might know, defines affordable housing as 30% of a household's before tax income, and BC Housing typically tends to use this definition as well. But the strategy recognizes that housing can be much more complex, and that definition can be much more complex. So for the purpose of today's presentation and for the Affordable Housing Strategy update, we'll be defining affordable housing as housing that includes a variety of housing types, sizes, tenures, and prices, and housing that supports a mix of incomes, ages, and abilities. And it also includes housing all across the continuum. So the strategy actually points to some few key measures and targets that the city should monitor for progress. And so we're going to be highlighting how the city is doing in these targets. So the first objective, to address the current local rental housing shortfall and to meet the anticipated rental demand in the future, the strategy recognizes the need to increase the supply of rental housing. And the strategy actually identifies a target of 50% of housing starts as rentals as a positive indicator to increasing the supply. So in 2021, CMHC data indicates that 48% of housing starts were intended for rental use in Nanaimo. So we're on track to meeting this affordable housing target. Throughout the presentation, you'll see that we've tried to put in some local examples just to be able to highlight some of these targets as well. So in 2021, some of you might know that construction started on a development located at 560 3rd Street that's going to provide 180 market rental homes that's designed for middle-income households. The project will have 2 4-story buildings with commercial units on the ground floor, and it's going to contain a mix of micro and studio units, 1 to 2 bedroom suites, and 1 to 2 bedroom lofts. To support infill and intensification in existing neighborhoods, the strategy has several targets around housing starts, and so they're all up here on the slide for you to see. So this includes multi-unit starts, apartment starts, and ground-oriented starts. So in 2021, we exceeded the strategy's target of 70% for multi-units, with actually 76% of all starts. And the strategy also identifies a target of 50% for apartments, and last year, 71% of housing starts were for apartment units. Finally, to support infill, the strategy points to a target of 20% of starts being for ground-oriented units. However, last year we only did see 5% that were attributed to ground-oriented. So previous years, we've seen very little investment in rentals, so the market is playing catch-up in apartment starts. However, we are starting to see an increase in building permit applications for ground-oriented starts and have several ground-oriented projects at the building permit or development permit stage. Here's another local project that highlights some rental apartment units in Nanaimo. So North Grove is located just at 6971 Island Highway, just north of Woodgrove Mall. The 3 buildings are located on the site, and they have 146 units, and they're a mix of studio, 1-bedroom, and 2-bedroom rental homes. And according to their website, the units were fully leased within 90 days of completion. Another local example is the Met, and this is a good example of a multi-unit recognized in the strategy as one way to support infill. So the Met is actually located on Mental Drive, right next to Cobb's Bakery and across from the Home Depot, and it has 98 units and contains a mix of 1 to 2 bedrooms homes for purchase. In years past, as we know, ownership of single detached housing was attainable for many moderate income families, but with the increase of real estate and rental prices, choices in both rental and ownership markets have become very challenging for many, many families. And in response, the strategy aims to facilitate a diverse range of housing options in order to create more options for attainable home ownership and rental housing. So the strategy identifies a target of 20% of apartments to be in 2- and 3-bedroom units to support this diversification. And the city exceeded this target with 44% of all rentals having 2- or 3-bedroom units. And you can see across that, the percentage has stayed consistent, but it's really important to note that only 4% actually make up the 3-bedroom or plus. And later on, we talk a little bit about some of the work that we're doing around family-friendly market study, which I think will probably maybe help us to understand better what is contributing to the low number of 3+ bedroom units. Here's another project spotlight. So this is 858 Georgia Avenue, which opened in October 2019 and offers a mix of 1- and 2-bedroom units for up to 27 small families. It's located within walking distance to school, parks, shopping amenities, daycare, and the university, and is operated by the Nanaimo Affordable Housing Society, who you're going to hear from today, and was actually funded through the BC Housing's Housing Hub program. The strategy identifies the need to build between a 3 to 5 year period 200 to 240 supportive housing units and 400 to 600 below market rental units. In addition, the strategy also recognizes the need to provide 100 to 120 rent supplements to facilitate access to independent living through market rentals. So the city is on track to meet the supportive housing targets. So since 2018, 250 supportive units have been opened, 164, however, noted as temporary, but many more additional units are planned for the next year. So the photo that's actually illustrated here is 285 Rosehill. Many of you might know it. Macola Development Services supported the Vancouver Island Mental Health Society with the redevelopment of this property to increase supportive housing for people who have mental health diagnoses or addiction or cognitive challenges. So that's one of the examples. Another one is the development at 702 Nicholl Street. So it's listed as one of the supportive housing projects. 702 Nicholl Street opened up in March 2022. It contains 51 units of supportive housing and will provide long-term supports for people who are experiencing homelessness or who are at risk of being homeless. There's also 14 bridge to housing beds available for women. There was a community amenity space that was included in the project, so outside community groups can also use it. And the Island Crisis Care Society operates this building and provides 24/7 staff support.
Ms. Wood, if we could just interrupt for a minute. Councillor Armstrong has a question.
Sure.
Yeah, I have a question because number 4 is actually support low income, not supportive housing, and that was deliberately said by the previous council because we did not want to focus on the supportive. So do you have any numbers for the low income supports?
Yeah, through the chair, Councillor Armstrong, that's just on the next slide.
Okay.
There's a further breakdown.
Thank you.
Sorry to interrupt.
So the city's on track to meeting our below market rental unit target. So 351 below market rental units have been created in Nanaimo since 2018, and more additional units are planned. And an example of this that you see on your slide there is the Sunfield Manor at 1125 Seafield Crescent. So it's a 5-story building. It contains 54 1-bedroom and 8 2-bedroom homes for seniors, most with their own patio or deck, and they're located very close to the Nanaimo Regional Hospital. And the building has shared amenity space and mobility scooter storage for the residents to use as well. So 59 Housing First supplements and 56 rent bank loans were funded by the city for residences with Nanaimo addresses through the John Howard Society. And I think it's really important to kind of maybe define what a rent supplement is and what a rent bank loan is. So rent supplements are funded payments that actually bridge the gap between what an individual or family can pay with what their actual cost of housing is. And rent supplements can be used in private or non-market housing. And they're often referred to as a practical and a quick way to provide affordable housing, and is faster than building a non-market housing unit. Whereas a rent bank provides financial assistance to tenants who are unable to pay rent or utilities because of a short-term crisis that has popped up in their life. And that can be used to pay for damage deposits or first month's rent if they are moving into a new place. And rent bank recipients must meet certain criteria. Each rent bank has their own criteria, but all across the board, the common criteria is to demonstrate the capacity to repay the loan with a regular source of income. It's also really important to note that BC Housing also provides rent supplements, so 113 homeless rent supplements and 1,197 private market rent supplements. And so the strategy actually identifies a target of 100 to 120 supplements as optimal. I put up there just an example of a private market rental building, which is at 6330 McRobb Avenue. But this is an example of how private market rentals can be supported by rent supplements or a rent bank loan.
Chair?
So over the past year, sorry.
Sorry to interrupt. Councillor
No
Bonner?
problem.
Can we go back to that last slide, please?
Sure. There we go.
I have concerns that we're calling a forgivable loan through our rents. It's not a rent supplement, it's just a loan. Calling it part of our rent supplements to bring it up to the 110, 120 mark. I know what we're doing 59 rent supplements, but those aren't rent supplements. It's just kind of get you through the next loan period, like your for your rent. So I don't. To me, a rent supplement is you're going to get this check. It's going to come monthly. It's going to help you maintain the place that you're in. That's a rent supplement check. But these things aren't, and very much needed. I'm not saying that they're not, but I don't know if it's fair to add them in there and say we're doing 115 rent supplements when we're actually not, because that could change in a month from now and they could right back down to 59. So just, it's all how you view it. So I would argue, if I wasn't necessarily in this chair, I'd argue that we're really only doing 59. And the 56 are necessary but not part of rent supplements. So just my thinking.
Thank you. So I'm just going to cover some of the actions and projects that we've had last year that fall under all 5 objectives in the strategy that address housing affordability and accessibility. So the first one is the short-term rental regulations. So as you know, a zoning and business license regulation update was completed in February of this year, and the city began accepting short-term rental business licensing applications on April 1st. So as of June 13th, 80 applications have been approved, and the majority of these that we're finding of these short-term rentals are actually in 1 and 2 bedroom secondary suites. There are several ways that the city supports increased housing supply through infill and intensification, and here are some of the examples. So in June 2021, amendment to Schedule D of the zoning bylaw was approved and allows for additional density when affordable housing is secured. This is covered a little bit later in the presentation, so I'll leave that there. As you're aware also, through proposed city plan proposes 2 levels of neighborhood designation to encourage more strategic residential infill in neighborhoods. Also, a new exemption is proposed in Development Permit Area A, Form and Character Guidelines, is to not require a development permit for construction that is limited to no more than a total of 4 dwelling units on 1 lot. So the purpose of this exemption is to encourage infill in residential areas by allowing 2 to 4 unit development to proceed directly to the building permit stage. The objective is to increase the number of ground-oriented duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes. Reductions are also offered on some development cost charges for not-for-profit housing, and I'm going to provide some numbers on DCCs a little further on in the presentation. The city also offers municipal tax exemptions for multifamily units in the downtown through the city's revitalization tax exemption bylaw. Some other examples supporting infill and intensification included the city's R7 row house residential zoning and R5 3 and 4 unit residential zoning. For example, in 2012, when the British Columbia Land Title Act was amended to allow the registration of a party wall agreement on the title of adjoining properties, allowing for fee simple row housing, the city responded by creating the row house residential zone. Since 2012, there have been 6 fee simple row house developments approved in Nanaimo, creating a new form of home ownership. 4 developments have been constructed, and 2 more row house developments are expected to be constructed in 2022. Another way the city supports infill in residential areas is by allowing a secondary suite as an accessory use to single-family dwellings or in an accessory building, sometimes also called a coach house. In 2021, an average of almost 64% of new single-family dwellings were built with a secondary suite, adding 141 secondary suites in the city. And since this zoning bylaw was amended in 2005, 3,661 secondary suite building permits have been issued by the city. So this includes for new suites and the legalization of suites. Secondary suites, I think, is really important to be noted that it's not calculated in the CMHC's vacancy rate, yet they fill a very important gap. For instance, in 2021, CMHC reported 4,530 rental units in 2021, which means the primary rental market may be closer to 8,000 units when accounting for the number of secondary suites. Question?
Yes, Councilor Armstrong.
Saw that.
Yes, do we find out how many are rented out, secondary suites? I have lots of friends that have them that refuse to rent them out because of the issues with the, in their opinion, of the Landlord Tenancy Act. So are we actually seeing how many are actually occupied versus how many we have?
I think through the chair to Councilor Armstrong, one of the challenges is because they're not captured in the rental vacancy rate for areas outside of Metro Vancouver. We do not have a way of easily tracking them. We know the units that do exist. Our experience is there are times, and we recognize this when we legalized it, as families evolve or as circumstances evolve, there'll be times when the units are used, and then there'll be other times when the units are vacant or incorporated into the house because they're needed by a larger family, for example. But what we can say is that every single one of the units is available as a rental home because you cannot stratify, in Nanaimo, you cannot stratify these units. So they're 3,600 non-subsidized rental units that are available, whether they're all full or not. We do not have that data.
Thank you.
Carry on, Ms. Wood.
So the development cost charge bylaw contains a provision allowing for the reduction of 50% for DCC fees for not-for-profit rental housing when at least 30% of the units are secured with the housing agreement, when that rent does not exceed 30% of before tax income. So since 2018, a DCC reduction has been approved for at least 7 affordable housing developments for provision of 287 units. And just as some examples of the estimated DCC savings for some of these projects, just over $67,000 was saved for 1406 Bowen Road for 25 units, just over $52,000 for 285 Rose Hill for 23 units, and just over $667,000 for 10 Butter Tubs for 156 units. As mentioned, the city's revitalization tax exemption bylaw encourages multifamily units in the downtown area by offering a tax exemption on the municipal portion for a 10-year term for new multifamily units. So 2 developments approved in the downtown area that are expected to use this exemption in 2022 are 400 Fitzwilliam Street with 197 units and 340 Campbell Street with 163 units. On November 15th,
Ms. Wood, Councilor Bonner has a question.
Thank you, Chair. Again, going back to, I think it's slide 23, where affordable housing developments, just the one prior to here.
Sorry.
The number with a big 7 on it. There it is.
This one?
Right. I've always been curious about this point is, is the reduction in DCCs a nice thing? Because you're 23 units and it's $5,600 or $56,000, which isn't a lot when you're building 23 units. So does this actually allow us to increase units, like more people are taking advantage of it? Or is it more people, they're going to build the houses anyway, and this is just a nice thing to cut down the cost of it?
I think through the chair, to, Councillor Bonner, I think your next delegation may be the best to answer that question in terms of how does that factor into their performa when considering projects in the community. But from our discussions with affordable housing providers in the past, it's always been seen by them as being important. Any contribution they can get, they put back into investing units. But our next speaker may be able to answer that question better.
Thanks.
Okay. So on November 15th, 2021, Council endorsed a new community amenity contribution policy that states for rezoning applications received after January 1st, 2022, the monetary amenity contribution rate is increased. The CAC policy also outlines a further monetary amenity increase for 2023 to 2025 and states that 40% of all monetary contributions be directed to the Housing Legacy Reserve Fund. This will allow the city to support more affordable housing initiatives.
If I could interrupt again,
Yeah, no
Councillor
problem.
Higgins has a
Anytime.
question.
Thank you, Chair. How much money were we previously putting into the Housing Legacy Reserve before we rewrote the CAC policy? Do we know, and do we have a figure on that? Because I'm curious. I know we bumped it, but then we increased how much the cost of CACs to people. So it's percentage-wise gone up, but also monetarily.
Sorry, through the chair, the question is specifically how much are we seeing coming in from community contributions? Because of course, council budgets contributions towards your affordable housing, Housing Legacy Reserve also, but you're specifically asking how many we've seen from CACs.
Well, I think it's two parts. So when we rewrote the CAC policy, we asked for more money to go into the Housing Legacy Reserve. How much of an increase percentage-wise, and what does that equate to in dollars?
I'm sorry, we don't have those numbers in front of us. We can certainly follow up and get those to you. I think part of the reality is you're still relatively early days in terms of your CAC. I know it seems like a while ago the council passed this policy, but it takes a while for it to impact new applications that are made after that time. So previous applications would still be under the old policy. So I think maybe next year when we do this presentation, we might have a better sense for you, but we can certainly pull together whatever data we do have right now.
I think Mr. Holm would like to speak.
Sure. Thank you, Chair. If I maybe just add to, I think it was flagged through the CAC review as well that it's not really a dependable, predictable stream of revenue necessarily. It depends on it depends on projects being brought forward for rezoning. We've also included in that a reduction in the amount payable for affordable housing projects that are brought forward through rezoning, if that's the case. And we're not, we staff and at council really, we don't have any clarity or ability to predetermine how much revenue we might be generating through that stream. As well, so a lot of time, often projects are the actual trigger to pay the CAC is through building permit. So it may be some time, there may be a lag between, or there would likely be a lag between the rezoning and then the receipt of those fees as well to put towards the Housing Legacy Reserve. So, thanks.
Thank you. A follow-up, if I may, Chair. And I'm sorry, I should have prepped these questions, but the intent of the Housing Legacy Reserve is solely to purchase land? No?
There's some discretion through the chair on what council could use that for. You've absolutely, council's used that fund to purchase land in the past, but you've also used it to offset the other 50% of DCCs in some cases. You've also used it to do works and services related to affordable housing projects, so frontage works and services, curb gutter, sidewalks, those types of things. I know council's used it for the emergency warming shelter space is one off the top of my head I can think of. So there's a variety of things that council's done to assist with affordable housing and vulnerable populations.
Okay, thank you.
Carry on, Ms. Wood.
So as kind of mentioned just previously, the CAC policy also includes CAC reductions for secured rental dwelling units at 50% and waived CACs for non-market rental dwellings at the time of a rezoning application, like my colleagues mentioned. So Schedule D of the zoning bylaw contains a list of amenities that a developer can provide in order to achieve more residential units or density within a development than the base zoning allows without requiring a rezoning process. Points are awarded for various amenities in Schedule D, and the developer must achieve a certain total of points to be able to gain additional density. So on June 21st, 2020, an amendment to Schedule D was approved, which award points when purpose-built rental units are secured, and awards points for secured affordable ownership units, affordable rental units, and non-market housing units. In January 2021, Nanaimo's first rent bank was launched, and council allocated just over $90,000 from the Housing Legacy Reserve Fund, which we just were talking about, to be distributed to the John Howard Society to operate a rent bank. And as mentioned previously, 56 rent bank loans were given to residents with Nanaimo addresses.
And Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. We heard earlier about all the issues with construction that the city's seen, whatever. Do we think that's going to have an impact on those that are going to build rental versus ownership condos or non-market? Because the costs have increased so much, is it going to be valuable for them to still build the rental projects? Or will we see more people go back to the condos where they're sold?
Somewhat nervous to do projections out, but what I can say is we've certainly seen in the last handful of years a focus on purpose-built rental buildings after decades of virtually none being built. So I think it's a combination of a number of factors, much needed in the community, a demand. Interest rates were low, and the rental rates were high, so it made sense for those projects. At this point, the projects we're seeing come in the doors are maintaining those numbers, so we're still seeing lots of interest in purpose-built rental. So our expectation is we're still going to see those projects proceed. Whether they continue to be the majority of projects, I think is a little bit, we'll have to wait and see, but every indication right now is they're still going to be a major component of our future development.
Thank you.
And Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you, Chair. Further on that, I know that the province has allowed us to apply rental-only zoning. We haven't done that because the market is driving that. How quickly could we flip that switch if Councillor Armstrong's, what she's suggesting might comes true, and that the market no longer builds rentals? Is that something that we can take advantage of quickly and easily?
Through the chair, I think Ms. Wood will be speaking to that in a few minutes, and we'll support that conversation then, if that's okay.
Carry on, Ms. Wood.
We have eager council to learn lots more. So the following slides highlights the ongoing projects that are the actions of the strategy, or projects that are supporting the work that are ongoing. So the first one is the family-friendly housing, which I kind of mentioned a little earlier. So the strategy recommends the construction of larger 2- and 3-bedroom units, appropriate more for larger or extended families within new multi-unit residential developments. So actually in the strategy, they provide an example from the city of New Westminster, and they have a family-friendly policy where they mandate that multi-unit strata condominium projects include a minimum of 30% of 2- and 3-bedroom units, and that at least 10% of those total units be 3-bedroom plus. So right now, the city is engaged in a market study that's anticipated to be complete at the end of this year, and data from that study will be used to develop Nanaimo's family-friendly housing policy. And just like the family-friendly housing policy, the strategy recommends that the city develop a policy that requires a minimum percentage of residential units as part of a rezoning application to be either accessible or adaptable. And this will be important, which will allow many people to age in place and meet special housing needs for individuals and families in Nanaimo. And again, the city is also engaged in a market study that's anticipated to be complete at the end of this year, and that data will be used to develop an adaptable and accessible housing policy. One of the key recommendations from the Health and Housing Action Plan was to support the incubation of a health and housing systems planning organization to implement the plan by coordinating funding and partner activities. So the systems planning organization will provide support in research, data, analysis, education, and information relating to health and housing. So it's anticipated, as you guys probably know, that to have their first board meeting this summer with the hope of hiring an executive director in the fall. And we popped this in here because it's really important to highlight the strong linkages that are between the strategy and the health and housing action plan, and how this is going to actually support the work of affordable housing in the city. The 2020 MOU agreement between BC Housing and the City of Nanaimo includes developments for 7 housing projects on 6 sites around the city. 3 affordable rental housing developments with approximately 120 homes for people with low to moderate incomes are in various stages of planning and development, and 4 housing developments with approximately 190 homes for people experiencing or who are at risk of homelessness are in various stages of planning and development. So we mentioned a little bit earlier, 51 of those supportive units at 702 Nickel opened in the spring, and an additional 51 units are scheduled to be completed later at 285 Prideaux Street. The city is also currently engaged in a housing needs assessment to gather data from all levels of government, consultation with the community, and using the new 2021 census data, which I think will be really great. The housing needs assessment is anticipated to be finished at the end of this year and will provide an updated snapshot on the current state of housing in Nanaimo, including any implications of COVID-19 as well on that. I think the census housing data will be released in September, so that information will be included on that. So here's just some of the preliminary findings of the housing needs assessment. I know we heard a little bit about increase in prices from the last presentation, but the housing needs assessment so far highlights that in 2021, single-family housing sale prices in Nanaimo have increased to an average of just over $761,000 in 2021 to just over $933,000 in 2022, highlighting a 22.6% increase in price within 1 year. And you can see this increasing trend from 2018 to 2021 on this graph here. And, you know, as mentioned in the previous slide, and as Mr. Lindsay indicated earlier, it's going to be interesting to see how the markets adjust to the new interest rate and how this might influence the real estate prices moving forward as well. The assessment also illustrates the rental vacancy rate in 2021 increasing to 1.8% from 1% in 2020. The vacancy rate, however, although it's increased here, remains persistently low, below the healthy 3% threshold that's commonly believed to be a balanced rental market. And here are the average rental increases the city has seen since 2018, showing a steady increase in rent across the bedroom types. So, and the housing needs assessment, as I mentioned earlier, said that there was 4,530 units of rental market in 2021 compared to 4,316 units in 2020. So showing an increase of 214 units in the primary rental market.
Councillor Armstrong, why is it you always...
I just want to know where they get these figures from, because I'm online looking all the time at these different things. I have yet to see a 3-bedroom at $1,400. You're lucky to see a 2-bedroom at $1,400. The average rate from what you see on Facebook Marketplace, and I'm just using that because they do that, is like $2,500 for a 3-bedroom, yet we're showing $1,400. I don't think those are accurate.
Through the chair to Councillor Armstrong, we're taking these from CMHC's 2021 statistics. So
And where are they getting theirs from?
So I think it's important when you look at these numbers. I think it's important to remember what it's showing is what people are paying in the community, not what you would pay to go get a unit today. So it's an average of what people who may be in a long-term tenancy agreement, who might have lower rates, are paying, are factored in here. So it's an average of what people are paying across the community, not what a person showing up today looking to rent a unit would pay.
Well, I guess that's
which I agree with would generally be
yeah,
higher.
like that's an issue I have, because to me that shows a false thing to people that this is our average rent when it's not. When you take a look at all the new builds, especially you take a look at the ones we talked about over on the north end of town, the 1-bedrooms are starting at $1,500, the 2-bedrooms are starting at $2,000. So to me, that's not painting a realistic picture of what's out in our community now. So is there some way that we can capture what the actual new rates are for these new builds? Because I can't find one that's under $1,500. Mm-hmm. And that's for a 1-bedroom, and sometimes that's for a bachelor suite. Mm-hmm. No, that is in Harewood too. Go take a look.
Okay. Through the chair to Councillor Armstrong, we can do that as part of, it would have to be market research on our end. As Mr. Lindsay said, what CMHC is showing, and they do it across the country, is what people are currently paying. That could be somebody who's been in a 4-bedroom or a 3-bedroom for 4 or 5 years. But for us to do that, we would have to do a scan, as you said, of those. And I think you're right in pointing out that somebody coming into the market today is paying at the high end. Now, this would capture that in an average, I guess, from last year. But what we could do is look at the reality that people are coming into the market for the first time to rent a new place, are starting off at a much higher rate.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Carry on, Ms. Wood.
Okay. So actually, at this time, I'd like to welcome Nanaimo Affordable Housing Society's Executive Director, Andrea Blakeman, who's going to be sharing information about the work that the Nanaimo Affordable Housing Society is doing to support affordable housing in the city.
Before you start, Councillor Hemmons has a question.
And the mayor after me.
Oh, well, he doesn't show up on here at all.
Thank you, Chair. Before Ms. Blakeman presents, I have a question on the market study for both the family-friendly and the accessible housing. So I guess I have a basic question of why do a market study when we know we need it? And I guess this might be an answer to that question is, are we looking for the exact figures that, like when we say we're going to ensure 30% of all units are accessible, is that something we embed is that something that they can achieve through providing certain amenities? I'm getting all mixed up here. Is that something that they can get additional density for, or is that something there's the question, or will we require it from everyone? Or is that something that the market study is going to give us?
I think that the study will come back with a number of options, including carrots and sticks, that can be used to achieve that. So absolutely, we could put it in our density bonusing, I think is what you're referring to, under our zoning bylaw. It could be put in there. It could be part of negotiation through rezoning. It can, and this is one of the options we'll bring back, be put in a building bylaw, so that it would require every new development that comes forward to have a percentage of units for adaptable. But that's part of the discussion and part of the decision ultimately need to be made by council.
Okay, thank you.
And Mayor Krogh.
Thank you very much, Chair, and through you too, Ms. Wood. Thank you very much for the presentation. Just a question of pure curiosity to start, and I have a few questions. We use the term intensification as opposed to densification throughout this, and I'm just wondering why. I would have thought that you're densifying the housing, and intensifying just strikes me as an odd bit of language. Are you going to tell me now this is a computer-generated thing that happens with me with my spell check?
Through the chair to Mayor, I might have to let my colleague answer that, because that was before my time, and I thought the exact same thing you did. And I actually had to go up and look at all the different definitions provided by housing, and yeah.
Okay, through the chair, I'd like to answer your question, and then I'd also like to duck back to Councillor Hemmons as well. So the two terms, you're right, have very similar meanings, and the nuance around densification versus intensification is basically in terms of our infill in our neighborhoods, looking at intensifying the use of a lot. And you're right, if you intensify it, you are also densifying it. So I think it's fair to say that we're using those terms interchangeably, and we can be a little bit more cognizant of that going forward. And through the chair to Councillor Hemmons, you mentioned if we already know that there's a demand, why are we doing the market study for the family-friendly and accessible and affordable? There's a part of the study that's quite key, and that's looking at the cost and barriers to why developers are developing the smaller units, and finding out what that is from the construction and development industry, and seeing, okay, where is the threshold that might limit somebody from wanting to develop a more accessible, adaptable unit, and and that in turn will inform the strategies we use to try and reduce those barriers and incent more of the units that we want to see. So I just wanted to clarify that for those watching and for yourselves. Thank you.
Mayor Krog, you have some more questions?
Thank you very much. Yes, so we're not meeting the AHS target of ground-oriented units. And am I to assume the point of ground-oriented units is around accessibility, or what's the point? What is a ground-oriented unit? Why is it important?
Okay. Through the chair, for a number of reasons. It can be a form for accessibility, although I would also put forward the case that multifamily units have elevators and other things that promote accessibility besides ground-oriented. Ground-oriented is also a preference for families of certain sizes and ages, and so it's around having a range of options as people are gravitating away from single family. And so part of, again, our family-friendly study is looking at what is it that is triggering developers to invest in multifamily versus ground-oriented. And in some cases, it's the intensity or the ability to get more units in land. And one of the things that you may see in other cities is that in some cases, multifamily developments have ground-oriented integrated with higher-level multifamily. So I don't know if
Go
Mr.
ahead.
Holmes or...
Through the chair, I just also, I think it's important to recognize that this is kind of a snapshot, a point in time. And I think this is something as we move forward, you're going to see some changes to. We have a number of projects coming down the pike that are ground oriented in nature. I don't know if Mr. Holm has the numbers right in front of him, but we are looking at them just in the last couple of days. So a significant number of projects that are early in their planning stage that are ground oriented, and if they all proceed, will be exceeding the targets next year. So it's a little bit, the flavor lately has been mid-rise buildings, but we're certainly still seeing a number of townhouse projects coming forward.
And thank you. Just a couple more. If you go to page 46, we talk about open senior units, including Seafield Crescent. Does Seafield involve the, I'll call it the deconstruction or demolition of existing units to create the new 62 units? In other words, is that a net figure, or is that a figure in addition to units that were already on that site? I guess what I'm getting at is, did we lose some to get to these numbers on any of these projects?
My understanding, my recall, and Mr. Holm might remember, my recall is that it's a new building within the existing buildings. It did not involve any demolition, but they cited this building within the existing, on the property, but between existing buildings.
So in fairness, these are in addition to existing units. And I just want to come back to a point that Mr. Lindsay made, Chair, with respect to these, the average rent increase and or cost rather, and that Councillor Armstrong raised as well. This points out the incredible importance of a program that allows people to get loans to maintain existing rental accommodation, because if they lose it, then they are into the market where it is $1,500 a month for the 1 bedroom or the 2 bedroom or whatever, as opposed to enabling them to stay in what is essentially a rent-controlled premise now, unless of course you're in a private home and it's sold and then you're out on the street potentially looking for it. I think it's something, for what it's worth, that BC Housing may wish to consider in the longer haul as a very significant and important program, is to enable people to remain in existing housing. Because if the alternative is to put in stricter rent controls around new buildings, then you're going to see the industry dry up in terms of its construction when we need so many housing units. In any event, thank you for indulging me, Chair.
You're welcome, Mayor. Anybody else before we proceed? Go ahead, Ms. Blakeman.
Good afternoon. Scaring myself there. Really appreciate the opportunity to speak in front of you. So thank you, council members, Mayor Krog. Please stop along the way. And I have all sorts of hands I wanted to put up through the last bit. So if there's questions about those things, some of those I may be able to address. So we're a nonprofit and we're also a charity. So I'm talking a little bit about who we are as a society. Very typical for nonprofit. We started in 1990, though we had no housing units until 1996, at which time BC Housing helped us build our first family complex at Pine Street on leased land from Nanaimo City. So that was 6 years that took from start construction to actually housing people. So you can see it can be a very long time. That's 17 townhouses. Okay. Some of you might be familiar with this particular project. It is rent geared to income. So this currently has a long-term subsidy agreement allowing us to keep this affordable. 2, 3, and 1 4-bedroom units is what exists here. This is with BC Housing Support. So this is what was constructed. Approximately, as somebody had said earlier, approximately 30% of the annual income or monthly income goes to rent, and that gets reviewed at least annually. Currently, we have 19 properties with 678 affordable homes and 2 housing projects under construction as we speak. So we've got 53 units at a complex on Hammond Bay Road, and that is part of the CHF funded program, which I can explain if you would like, and another 87 units in Parksville, so 79 apartment-style complexes and 8 townhomes. Those are all 3-bedroom. The supports, because we only provide, for the most part, provide independent housing, all supports to any of our tenants that come are through partnerships. So Nanaimo Affordable Housing, Vancouver Island Mental Health, Haven Society are just examples. Supports come from all of those partners. Those folks that are supported outside of that bring in their own support. So for example, anybody having home care in a seniors complex, they bring those services in themselves. As stated here, approximately 360 homes right now are designated for independent seniors. 42 independent family units in the 2 family complexes. And that's not one of them, sorry. And the balance, about 250 units are for individuals with disabilities. And that means mental health, physical health, etc. So that also includes some seniors. $350 Prudhoe. This particular building opened in 1997. There are still 2 tenants that moved in 1997 that live there. This is actually a success story that the mayor has walked through and seen and met. This is a rent geared to income building, all 1-bedroom units, single occupancy. Everyone has a physical or mental disability. And this is provided, the supports are provided with a contract that's been going on since 1999 with Island Health. Absolute success story. We could have 10 buildings like this, fill them like that, and we would see a lot less of what we're looking at right now on the street. We have 3 support staff, and they rotate through 2 buildings. So in total, there's 44 units in the buildings, 30 of which are spaces designated for Island Health tenants. So there is a direct referral process, and that is done in collaboration with the tenant support staff and Island Health. This is the second building that's the same rent geared to income as well. Most of the folks in these units, almost exclusively except for 1 perhaps, live at a shelter allowance for housing, which is $375. This is also single occupancy, 21 bedroom units, rent geared to income and for people with disabilities. So there's 20, you've probably seen these, they come in little 4plexes. Our Boundary building, sorry about that terrible picture. 41 rent geared to income studio units for adults at risk of homelessness and women fleeing violence. So again, our partners, Haven Society and Vancouver Island Mental Health, provide 24/7 support. And as you are all very aware, many folks that initially moved in are still there because there's no place else for them to go. So they're in 24/7 support that they don't really need because we need low-income light support or no support, somewhere to move them, and that's really difficult. We do try and do that within our portfolio, but it's really challenging. That is also built on by BC Housing with a 60-year operating agreement on land from the City of Nanaimo. 11 and 15 Buttertubs Drive. Many of you know where this is, right on the marsh. Independent low-income seniors, and this has one program that is phasing out after it was a 10-year program that's phasing out 2024. So seniors supported housing program. The housing is not supported. This is services to support its low end of market. So some people have lived there for many years and they pay $435. Other folks move in at $795. So very, very affordable kinds of housing. The senior supported housing, as you can see, is meals, a linen program, and Lifeline. So
just to interrupt for a minute, Councillor Armstrong has a question.
Thank you. This is one that well, at least I do, and I know Councillor Martman has got many emails from concerned seniors living in those. Can you expand on that? Because I think there's a lot of community misconception out there about what the program is for the new units.
Are you speaking of the units?
Number 10 Buttertubs.
Number 10, I will address that momentarily.
Okay, thank you. Because some of the people at 11 to 15 think they would.
Yes, and anybody who wished to was able to do that.
But not at the same rates, correct? Rental
No,
rates?
it's a different program.
Yeah,
So
and I think
completely
that's where,
different funding.
Yeah, the misconception came in. Thank you.
Of course. The bonus of this SHH program is that once it ends in 2024, BC Housing, with the support of BC Housing, we are extending the meal program for as long as they want to be on it in perpetuity. Um, 1612 Bone Road was originally a Lions Club project, and that, like many small organizations, do end up getting tired and worn out, and so that came over to our society. 27 units rent geared to income there. 3 one-bedroom units, which is a bit odd in a family complex, but we have lots of one-bedroom units having small families. 2 4-bedroom units, and the balance of those are 2 and 3-bedroom units. Corlett Place, also acquired when the Mount Benson Senior Citizen Society closed its doors after 50 years. 73 units, 1 bedroom and bachelors. 75% of this building is rent geared to income. So the vast majority are on shelter rate or very close to shelter rate, so 375. The balance of them are low end of market, so LEM units. This building is just starting its second phase of a massive overhaul. New elevator, the units are being completely refurbished, sprinkler system, et cetera, et cetera. Tenants have not been made aware of this because it's just in the throes of being tendered now. So that will be very exciting news. They know about it generally, they don't know about it specifically, so exciting. After the rehab, we're looking at another 25 to 30 years of use out of this building. Is there a trick? Oh, there we go. This is one of 4 walk-ups for seniors, which I know is a bit of an oxymoron, but they're walk-ups for seniors that were part of the Mount Benson portfolio in 2018 that came to Nanaimo Affordable. Currently, it's housing both seniors and people with disabilities, and that's in partnership with NACL, so Nanaimo Association for Community Living, who supports and services those tenants in those units. These 4 buildings, so 55 to 73, right up to the city yard, we are hoping to redevelop the whole site into more than double the density and a much more efficient building. The buildings are really at the end of their life, and we are unfortunately having to decommission them slowly. Same thing here, low end of market, just like the previous slide. Uh, 66 is across the street. That one has no plans. Currently 1 and 2 bedroom units. There is actually, I think, 2 2-bedroom units that are in that. Same thing, low end of market, seniors and people with disabilities. And the 4th. Selby Place. Also,
If I could just, sir, I have a question regarding these particular buildings because
of course,
I remember them being built, and I guess my question is, why are they being decommissioned? Is it because they don't meet building code standards anymore? Because I find it hard to believe that they're falling apart. Because I'm not.
I can't comment on you, but I can comment on the buildings. Unfortunately, they're experiencing so much distress. You can only put so much good money after bad. There's some, I won't get into the details, but there's some serious issues that can't be remediated. They're just too expensive. They're filled, well, without getting into details inappropriately, they're just slowly dying, and it's not pretty. Okay. And they're too expensive to keep. And again, walk-ups for seniors, bit tough.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Selby, same acquisition when Mount Benson closed. Low end of market seniors, studios and 1-bedroom suites. This had a major rehab in 2010 with the elevator, etc. Overcladding. It will go to another significant water lines. It's going to be having another BC Housing helped project in the next couple of years. And again, we're hoping to have that for another 25 to 30 years because of those improvements. Georgia Avenue, you've already seen a picture of this. Long lineup for this building. It is all low end of market. Some of the units in this are almost 1,000 square feet, so they're very generous units. As you know, there's close to everything: school, shopping, parks, university, etc. So fantastic. Again, we could probably have 10 more of these and fill them yesterday. Mill Street opened 2 years ago, 57 1-bedroom units for independent seniors, and low end of market. Again, long lineup for this building, and rents range from about $900 to $1,100, and that includes cable, internet, and phone. Oh, and their hot water. Number 10, Buttertubs Drive. And we are now in the throes of renting up these 159 studio, 1-bedroom den, and 2-bedroom units. It's all low end of market. This particular project is also BC Housing funded. It does not have an ongoing operating agreement on it, and it came in with 2 different projects that were put together at the very last minute. So there's 2 separate funding pots of money that went into it, so totally different proposal calls that came in that were put together. So it's a bit complicated from the accounting side. BC Housing is a partner here, so in theory they have 41 strata units in this building. So they're very much a partner, but there's no ongoing subsidies. It's all low end of market. The average rent is around $900. So we have units for $500 and we have units for $1,600. And then, but the average is around $900.
If I could interject, Councillor Martin has a question.
So just to back up on that a bit. So for clarification, because when I was speaking with our MLA, she was indicating that there is, based on income, rent-to-income housing here.
There's no rent geared to income housing. Rent geared to income housing with BC Housing means an ongoing subsidy agreement with BC Housing. There is none here, 0. We do have many units like that, but not this project.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
She said yes.
Councillor Bonner?
So how do you make money on these ones?
As a nonprofit, it's a really it's a tight balancing act. We make money with rents, and because of the program funding agreements on it, and I'm sorry, I don't PIA is one of them, and it's, I can't remember the acronyms, but there's two. One of them is the Innovative Housing Fund, so they put grants up front to make the mortgage smaller. So we have to figure out how we're going to do that. So the budget gets developed at the time the project gets proposed, and that's where I have lots of other answers to some of those other questions. And with those grants up front, it allows us to have a mortgage that's more manageable, and we have to have an operating program and rent structure approved by BC Housing. This is completely approved by BC Housing. That allows us to meet our mortgage payments and all our other commitments.
So compared to say a retail market apartment building that gets built, we're charging rents far in extreme of this.
Oh yeah.
But you're able to maintain this property with the existing rents plus the grant up front.
We have to. We have no choice.
Well, no, I realize that. Yeah, and so going forward, how long does this contract you have with them go?
There's no end. This is in perpetuity.
Okay, and if I may ask another question, and this is, sometimes we're hearing from some people who don't like these particular projects, that this is these are the ghettos of 2050. And what are we doing different to make sure they're not? And I hear about ghettos in Toronto and various other places around in the States. So what are we doing here differently to make sure that that's not? Because I don't agree that they're going to be the ghettos. I just don't have enough information to argue it.
We're on site. We're a nonprofit. How do I even say this? I guess if you met our team and the people that I call fabulous colleagues, they're not just doing a job. They put their heart and soul into what they're doing because they believe in what we're doing is a good thing for the community. And I think that's probably the difference. I don't know who else to share with you. I am happy to show you any of our buildings. You have my number. I'm thrilled to walk you through any of these buildings.
Oh yeah, I'm just trying to, I appreciate that. I don't have a problem with this. I'm looking at the REITs out there who say they can't build these and charge out rents unless it's at market value or else they're going to lose their shirts.
Well, you could never build this out at market value without those grants. I mean, these are millions of dollars worth of grant. We couldn't build. We have DCC relief. We have help from the city. We have partners. I mean, to answer some of those other previous questions, I mean, I was flagging my hand back here, everything helps, whether it's DCC relief, helping build the sidewalks, community contribution is included as part of the project. The project is the community contribution. Little bits and pieces, while it might be only $67,000 for Rose Hill, $67,000 on a 23-unit building is huge. Every single thing helps. And when we're crunching numbers and budgets, I mean, it's like a serious card game. It's a very, very big challenge. And when you're putting in a proposal to BC Housing, for example, and we have to consider the CHF funded projects like Hammond Bay. I'll go through that in a minute. But when we're trying to balance BC Housing as a partner, CMHC as a partner, who, you're right, in my opinion only, or our opinion, doesn't fully explain those rents. People that have been there for 25 years that are paying, $297 versus someone who's spending $1,300 or $1,500 for that same one-bedroom apartment in that same building. So they're taking an average. And how do you make that work? And so we're competing with that. So putting in a proposal for a building like this or any other building is highly competitive. Anywhere we can get land, DCC relief, anything that we can get counts. Everything counts.
Thanks.
Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. Just to follow up on what Councillor Bonner said, I think a lot of times when we see those, as he uses the term ghettos, when they happen is due to maintenance issues. Is there a steady maintenance budget for you, or do you have to take that from the rents, or is that part of the contract?
Part of the pro forma has to include maintenance, all staff components, everything. That's part of it's an extremely rigorous budgeting process, and maintenance has to be included, and we have our own maintenance team.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Carry on.
So current construction projects, both of these are the Community Housing Fund projects. So 20% of these units are at shelter rates. So again, for a single person, that's $375. 50% are rent geared to income, annual income testing on everything, and 30% are low end of market units. So the 1 and 2 bedroom units on Hammond Bay with underground parking, that particular project is a little bit different than Parksville, though they're the same funding project, because it's in the city of Parksville. Parksville has different requirements, so we have to fulfill BC housing mandates, CMHC mandates, and Parksville city mandates. So it was quite a dance. It was like a game of Twister with one arm missing.
If I could just ask a quick question on the low-end market.
Of course.
What does that define or include?
So a low end of market means usually, and there may be specific data, and John may be able to specify that, I believe it's 10 to 15% or more below market. So Georgia Avenue is a really good example of that, and people say, oh, well, that's not very affordable. The reality is we've had loads of young professionals or young couples, young families move in, they save for a couple of years, they all of a sudden have a down payment set aside because they're saving $200, $300, $500 a month. Well, that's exactly what that's for. That's a success story when they move out and they fly the nest. It's wonderful.
Thank you.
You're welcome. This is our Parksville project, though it looks very different now. We're hoping that is going to be ready for rent up, 87 units, early spring. And the reason I mention that here is because many of our tenants live in Nanaimo in one of our projects, one of our complexes, because they can't afford to live in Parksville and Qualicum. And that's where they're from, where they work. Hammond Bay Road, we think we're on second story framing. Again, same kind of project with 20% at shelter rates, 50% rent geared to income. So application process and eligibility. So really, each complex does have its own application process, and every building, just like your homes, they have their own environment, they have their own feeling. And part of our job, when our housing operations team does a great job, part of our job is to actually ensure that tenants go to a building that's a good fit for them, that's going to really support their success. And I can't stress how important that is. Low end of market are almost exclusively direct applications to the society. And every tenant that we have, regardless of their income, has to complete annual income verification. So that keeps us on the straight and narrow, and of course, that's something we have to verify when asked.
Go ahead, Councillor Armstrong.
I just have a question on the previous slide, or no, actually it's right there. For the current deep subsidy rate is $375 a month, yet we heard from you that the average one bedrooms, a lot of them are like $1,600. How is that a deep subsidy? Or is there something I'm missing?
The deep subsidy, that is the rent. That's considered a deep subsidy rental rate. So for example...
so you're only charging them $375?
Yes.
Oh, I took
the
it
balance
the
is topped up from BC Housing.
Got it.
Yeah.
I took it the
It's very confusing.
$375. Thank you. That makes sense now.
Carry on.
Okay. Some of our partners, including the city of Nanaimo, and we are working on more partnerships simply because we are much stronger working with people. They do what they do best. We house people. That's what we do. And any further questions?
I just would have one. Well, I may have more, but one to start with. You mentioned on the, I think it was the last slide, low-end market, and you keep track of the kind of the where those tenants are income-wise. What happens when they go beyond the acceptable limit of income?
Unfortunately, we have to give them notice because they no longer qualify.
Yeah, I realize that, and that's okay with the BC tenancy marriage.
It's a non-issue. Those are our mandates. We don't have a choice.
Okay,
Which is
so they signed it to begin with, I assume. So, yeah, thank you. Mayor Krog.
Thank you very much, Chair. And if I'm delving into matters that are confidential and you can't answer, I'll understand entirely. But you mentioned the success stories of people with severe mental health issues who have, two of whom have lived in the premises that I toured with you, gosh, some years ago now, before COVID, who survived there and prospered quite happily. Is BC Housing coming to your door, so to speak, or are they in a position to provide those kinds of supports? If you said, I can get a 200-unit apartment building tomorrow in Nanaimo, are you in a position to provide the money and staffing and supports to make a place like that function? What's the relationship like, in other words?
Okay, so Nanaimo Affordable has a long-going, rotating 3-year contract with Vancouver Island Health Authority. That's who pays the salaries of the tenant support staff. The buildings are rent geared to income, so we could not build that. So right now, construction costs conservatively $350-ish to $400 a square foot. So if you guys are intelligent people, you can do the math. You can see how expensive that is. You build small, efficient units that people on low income can afford to pay their hydro, their phone bills, all those things. Without those ongoing subsidies, not possible. Short answer.
Right, but what I'm getting at is that BC Housing isn't in a position now to provide staffing if you had other units, essentially. Is that what?
You know, I don't know the answer to that because BC Housing doesn't
Pardon
staff.
me, not BC Housing, Island Health.
Oh, Island Health. Well, that's a different question.
Yes.
I have asked dozens of times, can we expand that? Because it literally is a success story. I mean, you've seen it. People that wouldn't otherwise thrive and survive are living a life that they would never otherwise have. So I'll give you a little piece of data, and I apologize, it's ancient data, but it's just so poignant. And it was done by a former staff member around 2008. Of those tenants in 350 Prideaux, those 20 tenants, 5 years before they went into that building, there was 1,100, and I'm going off memory, 1,125 days of hospitalization. You know what it costs to house somebody with mental health issues? 5 years post, 85 days. Right there, you've paid for the building.
Okay.
Can you talk to Island Health?
Thank you, Mayor Krog. In order, we've got Councillor Thorpe, Geselbrecht, and then Armstrong again.
Chair, I think that John is on the line now as well from BC Housing, John McEwen.
So we're going to
Yeah, just so you know, he's available if you have
Okay.
questions for him as well, too.
Okay. Councillor Thorpe.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I do have a question for Ms. Blakeman. And first of all, really appreciate the report. Very informative and very articulate, and I appreciate your candor. My question, Andrea, relates to your clients. Can you give us an idea of the number of people that you deal with on a weekly or monthly or yearly basis? And if I understood correctly, you try to match a potential client with a particular building. And I'm assuming that you would then keep a waiting list for each site. Maybe you could give us an idea of what those waiting lists look like and just how many people you try to help. Thank you.
Okay. So it's not a me personal question. Our organization probably deals with 200 to 400 people a month. And that's just direct calling, knocking on the door inquiries, and it may be larger than that, depends. It fluctuates, but it's hundreds every month. Matching people, matching an individual. So just for example, not being specific or sharing anything inappropriate, but we interviewed a really interesting man and his dog, and it was a support dog, not certified, but a support dog. Very well educated, had some horrible things happen in his life, and finds himself very, very financially challenged for the balance of his life. He really, really wanted to move into number 10 Butter Tubs, and he decided, you know, with our support and lots of conversation, getting to know him before we placed him anywhere, he ended up being offered one of the Butter Tubs patio homes because he can keep his dog, and because he's so antisocial, being in a complex with 158 other people or 200 other people, reality is, how is he going to manage that? So it was about really offering him options that would allow him to be successful. So if you can imagine somebody who was really didn't like people, doesn't have a phone, doesn't have the internet, doesn't want to interact with anybody, putting him in a situation like that, not ideal. So that's just one example of many. And as far as waiting lists, if that answers your question, Councillor Thorpe, as far as waiting lists, it does vary. The unbuilt project in Parksville right now, or as of last November, had approximately 280 people on the waiting list. Wasn't even started yet. Number 10 is just an ongoing waiting list. 77 Mill Street, probably several dozen at the very least. Most of our projects, and 350 Prideaux and 153 Wallace, those projects where they're coming in through Vancouver Island Mental Health. The other 14 tenants, because 30 spaces are Island Health referrals, the other 14 spaces come from other societies, brain injury societies, Friends of Schizophrenia. So everyone there is of the same ilk. We don't keep a waiting list because there's almost no turnover. When there is turnover, we generally reach out to a partner. We probably realistically would have several hundred on that list at any given month. 7 years?
7 years.
Yeah, people wait for family housing, for rent geared to income family housing, in some cases 10 years. If you've got 6 or 7 children, of which we have a few families like that, they're in a 4-bedroom unit or a 3-bedroom unit, and they're crammed. So, you know, culturally appropriate housing is another issue. So I'm not sure if that answers all your questions as succinctly as you would like, Councillor Thorpe, but does that give you enough to?
Yes. I just wanted a sense of the need that you're seeing out there, and it's obviously great. So thank you very much, and thank you for your work.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councillor Thorpe. Councillor Kesselpark.
Thanks, Chair. Through you, thanks so much for the work that you do. I know that you folks have been working like crazy over the last couple of years, and incredible growth, and the need is extreme. And I'm just curious, in terms for your operations and being able to scale up and take on more projects, where do you kind of foresee the kind of barriers and bottlenecks?
That's a very complicated question and much longer than I'm going to be able to provide here. I'd love to give that some more thought, but the short answer is, reality is, we need spaces to build and we need money to build it, and that's the bottom line. We have some space to redevelop. Butter Tubs 11 and 15 are specific examples because they're in a floodplain. They flood regularly. They don't have foundations. They have footings. So there's lots of potential, but finding the funding, getting them out of the ground, and I mean $350, $400 a square foot. It's pretty tough. So
Great.
That's the biggest bottleneck.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you. Through you, actually responding to Councillor Thorpe, a little bit of personal experience. I have a dear friend who I advocate for who's been 7 years on the BC Housing. He's a person who's diagnosed with schizophrenia, but he has accommodation, but he has to share a washroom. His psychiatrist has written a letter. He's a good tenant, but the waiting list is long. So definitely there's a need.
Thank you. I don't see no further questions, and I believe Mr. McEwen is on the line.
Okay,
Correct.
thank you.
So the question is, do we have a quick break before we go to Mr. McEwen, or do we go right through to him?
Yes, I think, Chair, we should have maybe a 10-minute break and come back at 3 p.m.
Perfect, thank you.
Hi, Leonard Krogh here. I'm here with Karen Lindsay today. She's going to show me how to sign up for our app.
Voyant Alert, the City of Nanaimo's emergency notification system. So we'll start by going into the App Store, Mayor Krogh.
Done?
Next, you're going to hit search. And you're going to search for the app, which is Voyant Alert. So it's VOYENT. Now you see, it's already selected it. Click there, hit get, and then we're going to install.
And why are we downloading this app?
We're downloading that so that you can get this onto your phone system, and what it will do is it will send you a push notification out. So if the City of Nanaimo issues an emergency alert, it will actually push the notification out onto your phone. The really nice part of this app is that it's anonymous, so it goes by postal code. So we're not requesting you to put your name or personal information in. It just works off of the app through your phone system. There are also, if you have family members or friends that maybe don't have a smartphone or would like another way, you can also sign up online or call our Public Works Department, and they have phone and texting options available as well. So there's lots of options for people depending on what their needs are.
Fabulous. So you can rest with some comfort knowing you can find out what's necessary and know that people who are important to you are notified.
Absolutely. So now you have Voyant Alert on your phone. And now just select open. So the next thing you're going to do is you're going to tap in the postal code that it's prompting you.
All right. So
you just click on there and start entering. And then find on a map. So here you'll see the welcome page for the City of Nanaimo, and you want to subscribe to notifications, yes?
Yes.
Click that you agree to the terms, so click both to the yes for consent, and then hit next. And it's going to ask to either allow or not allow notifications, and you want to always allow.
Always allow.
Always allow. And the reason that is, if you don't allow, it won't push the notification out to you. So always allow.
Always allow.
And now you see here, you've got a message to accept that you've signed out. That's the two-factor authentication, and you're going to tap yes. And now you're in the system. Also, when you have a moment, we recommend that you pick your locations and sign up based on those locations, and then you'll get alerts from the City of Nanaimo.
Karen, thank you. Everyone, sign up.
Hey, Tiana. Hey. It sure is the coldest rink in town.
Whoa! Yeah, buddy! Nice save, James!
Wow, your goalie is keeping you guys in the game. Cheers.
Oh,
man, that's hot.
Sorry, that's the way I like it. Oh. Go, 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 go! Penalty shot! Scalds from hot drinks are a leading cause of hospitalization for children under 5.
2 minutes, stand in the front, unsportsmanlike conduct.
Hot tea and coffee will cause serious burns to a child in less than a second.
Got it, kid? Use the lid.
What we have here is the Real Ice technology that was installed at the Nanaimo Ice Center. It allows us to use cold water from traditionally hot water that we used to use for making ice. Basically, the water will come in through the bottom, go in through a vortex idea, making the air bubbles microscopic in size, which makes a better, more dense sheet of ice.
Differences that you'll see with the Real Ice is there's less snow developed, so that's easier for cleaning, and also it's a denser, harder, clear ice. So the ice skaters will certainly enjoy that. And the city plans to implement Real Ice at our other 2 arenas as well. Some of the other efficiencies we've implemented in this facility are LED lights in some areas, and we've also, in the last few years, installed a higher efficiency refrigeration system, which lowers our energy costs. Both Zambonis at our facility are now electrically operated, so there's no harmful emissions, and they're very quiet as well. So what this means for the city is that we're able to use less energy and also reduce the amount of greenhouse gas emissions, which is more beneficial to the environment.
We're here at Bruce and Dundas. Somebody's stolen the street names that were here, so we're here to replace them. Our sign shop has just generated us 2 signs, so I'm going to go through the process of putting it together and reinstalling the street names. First thing, we got to center the signs. We do everything on this truck. We've got all the equipment on here to build, install, remove, repair, whether it's street signs, street names, posts, banners, Christmas decorations, and so forth. I'm going to basically just put the sign in the brackets, and we'll be doing both signs, of course. So I've got a cross bracket that I'm going to put in, and then add the top sign, which is this street we're on, Dundas. Sorry, do the same there. We put the street that we're coming up to on the bottom, so they all basically have the same. The cross street will be on the top. We got to put some bolts in to secure them so nobody will steal the street name. We're ready to go. Just put this back and we'll go out and install this where the missing one is. Every year we do what we call a stop sign survey, where we go around and check all the stops. We clean them, make sure they're in the right spots, in good condition, not bent, and we also clean the street names, make sure they're good. As we're doing that, if there's ones that we decide we want to replace, we do that at that time. This year we're looking at approximately about 120 sets. It's very expensive to do, but we're continually, weekly changing street names because of either them getting damaged or people breaking them and taking them. So I'll put this on, and then I put a bolt through to secure it to the post. There we go. And that's good, we're done. Dundas and Bruce Ave are now ready to go.
Welcome back from the break. And I believe Mr. McEwen, are you still on the line, I hope?
Hello.
Hi, welcome. So I asked Dale to introduce you, but he said I would be able to do a good job, so the floor is all yours.
Thank you. And good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Thanks very much for having me today. My name is John McEwen. I'm the new Director of Development for the Vancouver Island region. I just started this position in February.
I think we got some technical difficulties.
Yeah, your connection is very poor, John. It's really hard to hear you. It's kind of crackly. We're just going to try and fix it from our end, but yeah, we're having... It's not us? Yeah, so it seems to be coming from your side. I'm not sure if... Are you logged in through like a Horizon or like a third-party network or something? Could you... It's very distorted. I'm wondering if you could maybe try to log out and log back in again. Maybe it'll be better. If you go through Chrome or Google, just straight through the internet, that should be better.
Sounds like he's logged in through Daffy Duck.
Oh no, be nice.
Is that better?
Oh, perfect.
Wow. Okay, we'll try this again. So thanks again for having me today. My name is John McEwen. I'm the new Director of Development for the Vancouver Island region for BC Housing. Took over for Malcolm McNaughton in February of this year. Before I just jump in to my update to Mayor and Council, I just want to acknowledge that I'm calling into you today from the unceded traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. So since I started this position, I've been working with city staff on several initiatives in the city of Nanaimo as it relates to affordable housing, and just wanted to take this time to provide Mayor and Council an update on what we're currently working on at BC Housing in Nanaimo, what's currently in construction and or recently completed, and how these projects fall into the different funding programs. And then following this, I'm happy to answer any questions. So firstly, I'll just start with a status update on some of the supportive housing projects that we're working on, specifically as it relates to the existing memorandum of understanding with the city of Nanaimo. As you're all likely aware, the 702 Nickel Street project, also known as Samaritan Place, opened in March of 2022. This building includes 51 studio housing units, 1 2-bedroom unit, and 6 bridge to housing units, accommodating an additional 14 beds. The Operators Island Crisis Care Society and individuals living at 702 Nickel pay the income assistance rate. Demolition is underway and expected to be completed shortly at 285 Prideaux Street. Following this, we're just working with city staff on the building permit process to start construction. And then finally, community engagement has been ongoing for the 355 Nickel Street in partnership with Sunami First Nation. We're also working on several projects for women and children affected by violence in the city of Nanaimo, 2 specifically. And then in addition to BC Housing's Women's Housing Fund and Supportive Housing Fund, we have several affordable housing programs that target different areas of the housing continuum. This includes some older programs that we've recently completed projects in Nanaimo through, such as the Investment in Housing Innovation Fund, as well as our Affordable Rental Housing Fund. These programs provide capital grants towards housing projects in order to create affordability. So there's been approximately 244 units recently completed through these programs in Nanaimo. The rental rates for these projects vary. However, all of them are below market rent. And the majority of rent levels would be at the low end of market rent levels, as well as rent geared to income rental levels for those programs. In addition to this, we also deliver the Community Housing Fund, as I'm sure some folks are aware. This supports the creation of mixed income buildings by BC Housing providing both capital grants as well as ongoing operating subsidies to nonprofit partners to deliver these mixed income affordable housing projects. The unit mix for these buildings includes 20% of the units at income assistance rates, 50% of the units at a rent geared to income rental rate, and 30% of units for individuals with moderate income. So generally this is based on the CMHC average market rent for the city of Nanaimo. So BC Housing, in partnership with nonprofit housing provider partners, has recently completed 23 units through this program, and we have another 189 units in construction. We're also working in the early stages of a project with Sunami First Nation on reserve lands through this program. And then finally, BC Housing also has the Housing Hub. The Housing Hub department delivers rental and affordable home ownership housing for middle income earners. All units through the Housing Hub are income tested prior to move-in to ensure they meet, the individuals living in these buildings meet BC Housing's middle income requirements. And we currently have approximately 150 units that are completed in the city of Nanaimo through the Housing Hub, and an additional approximately 300 units in construction. And these rental rates can go to market level rent. But like I had mentioned, this program is based on testing the income levels of the individuals living within those units so that it's targeting middle income earners and not higher income earners that wouldn't qualify. And then the last project I'll mention, which I'm sure most of you are aware of, is our partnership with Sunami, the School District 68, and the city for the Tutuxton project. And that project's in early community engagement stages. So that's kind of a brief overview of what we're currently working on in the city of Nanaimo. And we're working on staff on a few other initiatives as well, but I think I'll leave it there and then happy to answer any questions that Mayor and Council might have.
Thank you, Mr. McEwen. Council, any questions? Councillor Armstrong.
Yeah, I have a few, if that's okay. One of the concerns I have is that we've been asking on numerous occasions going back to 2018 for second and third stage supportive units, and BC Housing told us that they weren't doing that. Yet when I look at what's going on in Port Alberni, their newest build is for second and third stage supportive units. Is there a reason why that can't happen here?
No, there isn't. I mean, I'll try to answer that. So BC Housing's moved away from transitional housing units because we typically don't have enough housing stock for those individuals to transition out of, so it becomes a permanent type housing. And generally we've used supportive housing for individuals experiencing homelessness, but we are recognizing that there is individuals who are ready to move on from fully supportive housing and maybe require less supports. And then what we're calling that is semi-supportive housing, similar to I think what you're referring to in Port Alberni. We are in conversations with city staff about moving towards that model. I think with the city of Nanaimo specifically, there was a situation with a lot of people experiencing homelessness and had some significant supports they needed. But we do also recognize that there is folks that have gotten those supports and are now ready for maybe less supports. So that is something we are working with city staff on for future projects.
And my second question was, at that same meeting, we heard that Port Alberni's got over 10 different supportive units, which I can't find any place. I found a total of 3. And we were asked why it was so much easier to build in Port Alberni than Nanaimo. And when you do take a look at the 3 that are there, they're all 30 units, which makes a big difference to the neighborhood and as well as to policing, ambulance, and fire. So is that something you can elaborate on? Please?
Yeah, I can. In terms of the number of projects, we can work internally and provide that information to Mayor and Council in terms of what we are currently working on in the city of Port Alberni. City of Port Alberni is a different community in different size, so the number of units varies because of that. And then the last piece is, the city of Port Alberni has been supportive of working together to identify sites and bring sites forward for us to work on supportive housing projects. But we've also been, actively working with city staff on supportive housing projects as well. So I know that was said. I don't have too much to add from that, but just to say that, both communities we're working together collaboratively on trying to move projects forward.
And then my last,
Sorry, that doesn't specifically answer your question, but in terms of the number of projects in Port Alberni, I can definitely follow up on that.
and my last question is that I've been asking this for many years. Can you show us the success rate of people leaving from the supportive units going into successfully living, transitioning onto their own? Or are the same people still living there like 10, 12 years later?
No, we do have that information, and I'll connect with our operations teams to provide the city that information of where folks have turned over. But it also goes back to my last point around semi-supportive housing. What we often find is that there's no availability in the marketplace for individuals to go. So then they get, they unfortunately are stuck in supportive housing as their permanent housing option, because there's just not enough available units in the affordable housing and not enough market available units. So that's definitely a challenge that we do face.
So that goes to my point that we do really need second and third phase housing that don't need as much in-depth supports, which would then open up those beds for those that really need it, instead of keeping people there that don't need them.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, I think we need more housing across the housing continuum. Absolutely.
So very happy to hear that you consider us for second and third transition housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Armstrong. Any other questions, comments? Okay. Oh, you're on there now. Okay, go ahead, Councilor Brett.
Thanks, Chair. Through you, a couple questions. The first is, what have been the impacts on you folks just in terms of the sort of increases in cost of building over the last 6-8 months? Is that impacting sort of the rollout of projects and what you're able to take on?
Yeah. I mean, it is absolutely impacting the metrics that some of our programs we used for those programs, just because costs are so significantly higher. So, for example, in the Community Housing Fund program, what we were anticipating for capital grant amount and our ongoing operating subsidy is not where it is in today's marketplace. But at this point, we haven't seen anything slowed down or stopped because of that. But we're having ongoing conversations with our senior leadership and our executive team to plan for this, because there are projects that are going to be coming forward that are much higher than what we forecasted. So currently, no, but it's definitely something that we're keenly aware of and could have an impact in the future.
Great, thanks. And just one more question. Thanks for all your work, and I know that yourself and staff have been working incredibly hard, and there's unquenchable demand for housing right now. And in Nanaimo, we're really experiencing the consequences of that. And I'm just curious. Sort of, I asked this question to Andrew at the Nanaimo Affordable Housing as well, but in terms of scaling up efforts in Nanaimo, what for yourself would you see as the biggest barrier or big barriers in terms of being able to do that?
I think one piece that we've been definitely working with city staff on a lot is around land and just available land to develop on, and partnering with the city on that. And then any ways to expedite rezoning processes, I think is something that could be hugely helpful. I'm interested to see what happens using the City of Victoria's example, where projects that can go up to the OCP projects can now potentially, if they're residentially zoned, go straight to the maximum density under the OCP. So, tools like that are definitely things that can expedite and save a lot of costs when it comes to delivering affordable housing. So those are the two ones that are kind of top of mind for me.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that answer.
Mayor Krogh.
Thank you very much, Sharon. Through you, thank you to Mr. McEwen. I'm just curious, setting aside the availability and the cost of land in the total cost of providing appropriate housing, I'm just wondering, is there a substantive difference between the modular housing that was, in terms of cost, that we just saw completed at 702 Nickel versus new construction, in other words, say a 3 or 4 story wooden frame building?
So currently, I don't think we're seeing a significant cost savings. We definitely are seeing some savings around schedule and timeline to some extent, but that is all dependent on lining up the timelines in that individual's manufacturing plant, because you can oftentimes get stuck if you miss a certain timeline to get in their system essentially, and then the schedule is very comparable. So cost, no, I think it's not significantly less to do modular, and then timelines, it can be significant if you're working really collaboratively with that builder and you're able to get into their manufacturing timeline.
So, if I may, Chair, fair to say that if there's no substantive difference in cost, the whole concept behind the modular units was you could get them up faster. Gosh knows they're needed. But did I hear you suggest that in fact we're facing quote unquote supply chain issues there that mean that we're not really any further ahead than simply trying to proceed with new construction?
I would say it's on a project by project basis. Some projects we've seen, it's been a lot faster using modular and has been really intriguing to us because of that. But then, you know, in the past 2 years with the supply chain challenges, some projects were just hit really hard, and then it's not, you know, there's not significant time savings.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Next is Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. We always, at least I always seem to focus on supportive housing, but I want to talk a little bit about Ms. Blakeman's presentation, where we know that we've got a huge wait list for those that have schizophrenic or other mental health issues. Is there any plans to maybe build another, like, I know that we can't have large numbers there simply because of the unique needs of the individuals, to do more of that? I know we just had the CMHA do the ones on Rose Hill, but is there something to look at that? And my next point would be to, we've relied heavily on the private sector to build for multifamily. Is there something that can be done for that? Because we know we've got a lot of families that are living in 1 and 2 bedrooms with 3 or 4 kids. Thank you.
Yeah, so in terms of the model similar to Rose Hill, absolutely happy to have conversations, and those projects are eligible to come through our funding calls when they become available. Right now, our community housing fund and our Indigenous housing fund, the calls are closed. So I'm absolutely happy to have those conversations with those groups and see if there's a project there that would be eligible to apply through the community housing fund. In terms of your second question around the multifamily piece, the Housing Hub was somewhat intended to do that, but it's a financing only program. So the rental rates aren't always as deeply as affordable as I think the need that you're speaking to. So then it really also does come back down to the Community Housing Fund, Indigenous Housing Fund as options to create that type of multifamily kind of larger unit housing. And those calls are currently not open. And then the last one is we're working really closely with CMHC as well, who has funding that is open right now for that type of housing. So I'm happy to be a liaison there as well and see if there's any of our legacy programs that, you know, if there is grant available to kind of layer on to the CMHC funding.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your openness to all these questions.
Any further questions, comments? What a quiet group today. Well, thank you, Mr. McEwen, for providing all the information for us. And we look forward to bigger and better things in the challenge to house some of these difficult people. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm assuming the next item is the proposed initiatives to increase affordable housing. Is that, or do we do that already? No.
Through the chair, I think that's, as you mentioned, that's the next item up on your agenda. So hopefully through this discussion, the presentation from staff and from our 2 delegations, I wanted to thank them both for participating this afternoon. Hopefully the committee has got a fairly good understanding of the state of the nation. As I mentioned off at the start of the meeting, we really wanted to come back to council and give you that understanding of what's actively going on today and which project staff are working on right now. But also the second report is kind of a look forward and what are those options that we have for 2023 and what projects can we work on. And as I said earlier, I think at the end of the day, I think council's been consistent. We want to make sure that we're pulling on all the levers that we have to do our part in making sure that we can bring affordable housing to the community. So this next portion of the presentation, I'll again turn it back to Ms. Wood, and we're going to talk to you a little bit about what are our potential initiatives, but I want to be very clear, these are things that if the committee supports and ultimately council supports, they would form basically our work plan for 2023 and things that would all have to come back to you for further discussion. So no real final decision on these items today, but we wanted to make sure that the committee and ultimately council is generally supportive of the direction that we're proposing to take. So I'll turn it over to Ms. Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Lindsay. So staff have completed a summary of approaches used by other municipalities to increase affordable housing and compared them to what the city is doing. So these are contained in the agenda package that you'll find a table that summarizes these, and I'll be providing a little bit of a summary of them as well. And I think this may touch upon some of the things that Councillor Gesselbach was asking of Mr. McEwen and Ms. Blakeman around, what are some other things that other municipalities are doing to kind of get through that chokehold. So I'm just going to provide a summary of each of these. So the first one is what we call inclusionary zoning. So usually it requires developers to set aside a percentage of affordable housing for multifamily dwellings in a particular area. And I think I have to preface this by evaluations across Canada reveal that mandatory inclusionary zoning is more effective than voluntary inclusionary zoning. However, BC doesn't have the legislation here that would allow BC municipalities to do mandatory inclusionary zoning like Ontario or Quebec, for example. But the City of North Vancouver, as an example, uses voluntary inclusionary zoning through secured rental housing as an amenity at the time of rezoning application through their density bonus. They also have community benefits policy to give direction for the provision of that rental housing. Nanaimo also, as you've seen previously, uses incentives in Schedule D of the zoning bylaw, awarding additional density for secured housing projects. And Nanaimo's CAC policy also allows a developer to provide an in-kind amenity, such as secured affordable or rental housing, as a voluntary contribution at the time of a rezoning application. The other one that I think we've been hearing a lot about in the media is also the Langford Attainable Homeownership Program. So developers there build an attainable housing stock of 1, 2, and 3-bedroom condominiums or townhomes, with a portion of the development fees going towards down payments for first-time home buyers. And I think it's really important to note that the program is strictly for middle-income earning individuals and families who can qualify for a mortgage but don't have a down payment. In 2022, Langford actually made some changes to their attainable housing program, which mandates developers to provide a minimum of 5% of units to be sold as attainable. And so staff is observing how this pilot project proceeds.
Could I just ask a question, please? Ms. Wood, so my concern is one of finances. So the development fees, and correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is there to cover costs involved in staff to proceed to get the development underway and all the regulations that have to go with it. So I guess my immediate thought was when a portion of those development fees are to be used as a down payment is that the development fee is probably going to go up. Am I right or wrong on that?
Well, through you, Chair, I think one of the things that the City of Langford staff that I spoke with said that they actually made some changes to the program this year because they were having some challenges in the past. And the way they kind of dole that out is they do provide some funding from their housing fund to help through the grant program for folks to provide that down payment. So I think we'll be able to monitor in the next year and see how things are improving there.
Thank you. And Councillor Armstrong.
I was just going to say on that too, if you want to look, Calgary's got the leading edge on that. They're considered one of the world's best on that, and they've got a really good success rate for the attainable home ownership.
Thank you.
Carry on.
Okay. So some municipalities are also using tax exemptions to encourage the development of affordable housing, including the preservation of rental housing. So some examples include the City of Victoria, where a permissive tax exemption policy is offered to special needs and supportive housing properties, including short-term emergency or crisis protection for members of the community, or supportive housing for people with special needs, halfway houses, transitional homes, and group homes if they meet the eligibility criteria. Then this is for up to 10 years. The City of Kelowna also uses a revitalization tax exemption program and offers developers relief from a share of municipal taxes for purpose-built rental housing. And Kamloops offers a similar program to Nanaimo and offers a downtown revitalization tax exemption that gives up to 100% reduction on municipal taxes for multifamily residential construction in downtown areas. Rental zoning, rental-only
Excuse me,
zoning,
can
which
I
is,
interrupt again? Councillor Bonner has a question.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, if I may. In terms of property tax exemptions, are you referring to for-profit companies getting tax exemptions? Because all the things that you described to me, I think we're all not-for-profit agencies doing housing.
through the chair to Councillor Bonner, I know that some of them are for nonprofit and some are for if they're multifamily rental units.
So the tax exemption would be just on this specific unit, not for the entire property?
That's right.
Okay. And we don't do that right now?
No, we do.
No.
As Ms. Wood mentioned, we have the downtown. So council basically has two tax exemption programs. One is for a hotel built anywhere in the community, and the second is for any development basically within the downtown core. And we've had that in since 2018, I think is noted here. But those are the only two programs. And again, this is just something to explore, but council could look at, for example, having a tax exemption program for purpose-built rental. And that could, if you wanted to include market rental as a way of incenting further purpose-built rental buildings. But again, no decisions today, but certainly something we think it's worth at least exploring and making sure we look closely at how others are doing.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Guzzelbart?
Thanks, Chair, through you. Just a question, like the permissive tax exemption, like say when Nanaimo Affordable Housing is setting up a multifamily unit, do they receive a permissive tax exemption as a nonprofit providing rental, or they do? Yeah.
My current information is that they do apply for it. But maybe since we have Ms. Blakeman, she's certainly, if you want to ask her a question directly about their experience with that, I mean, we have that opportunity under this format to do that.
Yeah, by all means. Ms. Blakeman?
Sure.
So we do apply annually for tax exemptions, and I believe most, if not all of our properties are tax exempt.
Okay.
One might not be. To double check with our CFO.
Great, thanks.
You're welcome.
So just to follow up on that, I mean, we do provide permissive tax exemptions for non-market housing. This would be looking at specifically to incentivize a program for incentivizing like a private rental only buildings. Okay. Great. Thank you.
Councilor Bonner, you were on my screen, then you disappeared. Okay, carry on then. Thank you.
Sorry about that. So the next area is rental-only zoning, which is zoning that requires new housing in residential areas be rental-only, ensuring existing rental housing is preserved, and it can be used to ensure that a certain number of units in a new development is rental. So there's actually a number of municipalities using this approach after the province of BC enacted rental tenure zoning authority to municipalities to protect this rental tenure. So for example, the city of New Westminster used this zoning and applied it to a number of strata properties operating as rentals. These strata companies' properties actually took the city of New Westminster to court. However, the BC Supreme Court upheld the city's rental residential zoning powers. So currently, the proposed city plan includes policy to support rental-only zoning. The next one is the removal of exclusionary zoning. So the removal of exclusionary zoning creates a more inclusive housing forms by allowing duplexes or triplexes on single dwelling lots. And you may have heard of the city of Victoria is in the process of consultation on what they're calling the Missing Middle Housing Project, which focuses on inclusive housing forms without needing to have to go through a rezoning process. The city of Edmonton also allows duplexes and triplexes on single dwelling lots. And in New Zealand, implemented countrywide allows for 3 houses, 3 stories in height to be built on single dwelling lots, ending single family dwelling in all their urban areas. Nanaimo, for example, allows duplexes, triplexes, and 4plexes on all R5 and R6 zoned properties. Also, speaking to some of the topics we spoke to earlier with Mr. McEwen and Ms. Blakeman, The next area that municipalities are also using is preferential or expedited processing, and it's an approach that's being used to fast-track affordable housing. So preferential processing gives priority to applications for affordable housing over other applications in the approvals process in order to shorten the length of time required to obtain rezoning, development permits, and building permits. Expedited processing reduces the time for development permits by eliminating processes where possible. For example, delegating development permits to staff and allowing staff to consider variances. So listed in your summary there are some examples that include the City of Burnaby, where they've been giving priority to all affordable housing applications. Kamloops is also using the same approach. City of Kelowna, another example, has simplified the application process of secondary suites, and Langford streamlines the development approval process for affordable housing. Also in the media enacted recently, the City of Victoria delegates all affordable housing development permits to staff, and they have the ability to consider all variances. So Nanaimo does have a variation of this, where the development permit approval is delegated to the general manager of development services for proposals with 100 units or less and for smaller variances. Land and financing through funds and corporations includes the raising of funds or provision of land for affordable housing. And so this can be accomplished through fundraising and housing corporations to provide secure equity assistance and leverage. So several municipalities have created their own type of housing authority. This includes the Capital Regional District, the Cowichan Valley Regional District, and the Resort Municipality of Whistler. The cities of Victoria, Port Alberni, and Campbell River have provided land for affordable housing either by leasing land or by purchasing land. For example, just recently, Victoria purchased property for mixed space use that will include over 200 affordable homes that will be managed by the Capital Regional District Housing Corporation. So Nanaimo has also done this. We provided land or leased land for affordable housing, including Tutuxton, so the Fifth Street lands, Park Avenue, 285 Prideaux, 437 Wesley Street, and 1425 Cranberry Avenue. And of course, the Housing Legacy Reserve Fund is also used to support affordable housing in Nanaimo. Pre-zoning is another approach that's being implemented recently by cities of Victoria and Saanich, which you probably also heard in the media. So any projects by nonprofit, government, or co-op housing organizations will no longer require rezoning or public hearings when the proposal is consistent with their official community plans. The City of Kamloops, another example, what they've done is they've rezoned 3 city sites for affordable housing development for actual specific demographic targets and will provide long-term leases. And Nanaimo has also taken this similar approach. Following the adoption of the 2008 OCP, the 2011 zoning bylaw pre-zoned lands in a limited number of target areas to support achieving density targets in the current OCP. There are many other areas in the city that have zoning that supports the development of affordable housing. So recent projects that did not include rezoning include 1125 Seafield, 6010 Hammond Bay Road, 20 Barsby Avenue, 285 Rose Hill Street, 702 Nickel Street, 285 Prideaux, and 1608 Bowen Road.
And Councilor Gilsbrook.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, there's a few of these. Got a few questions just to unpack a little bit. Maybe I'll start from the bottom up. But just on the pre-zoning of land, yeah, I see City of Victoria and Saanich just this year have looked at that. I'm curious what is different to what we're currently doing, and like what would we have to do additionally? Like say in this official community plan, we have the outline of what we foresee sort of the usage for all those each area in town. Would we just simply say that if you want to use it, you can go to the maximum of what it says in the official community plan and don't need to come to through a public hearing rezoning process to make that occur?
Through the chair to Councillor Gilsbrook, that's one option. And another one is, as we look to seeing the draft city plan, should it be adopted, we then have the opportunity, and I think Ms. Wood will talk about this a little bit more, about looking throughout the city, much like was done with the 2008 OCP, and saying, okay, where are the areas that we wish to actually put the zoning in place that actually supports where we want to see that type of development for affordable housing. So, for example, we have our residential corridors, and then our 7 urban centers, for example. And so we can expand on what we've done in the last OCP by reconsidering all the land uses that we're updating in this iteration of the OCP.
Okay, just to follow up on that one specifically, so we would basically, once our official community plan has like passed and is accepted into bylaw, then we would go back and identify sub-areas within that plan that we would like to just immediately match what the OCP land designation is to that area, so no rezoning needs to occur. And then would that go through like a public hearing, or just like one foul swoop zoning amendment or zoning change for everything that falls in those specifically chosen areas? Just details. Yeah.
Through the chair, you'll have an opportunity today to actually consider this as part of the recommendations for how we proceed. So that's the first thing. And then, like with any bylaw change to zoning bylaw, it would go through the full required public hearing process. But prior to that, we would be going through a detailed assessment to see which areas make sense to support and encourage these implementing this.
Great, thank you. I've got more questions, but maybe we'll do a round first and then I'll come back to
Well, I have nobody else on the speakers list at the moment, so I'll carry on.
Okay. The next is sort of the provision of land and financing through funds and corporations. So this is my understanding of like basically a housing development corp. Is that kind of what this is getting at?
Through the chair to Councillor Gesbrock, it's one of the options that other municipalities are doing. They are creating their own housing corporation.
Great. Yeah, I was speaking with somebody today that worked for Whistler and was just saying, you know, they back maybe it was when the Olympics was happening, but there was a housing shortage, and they went ahead and built a bunch of housing, and one was like for sale, and basically people could buy the house or the unit, and basically the stipulation on it, like the city went through and developed it, was that when they resold it, they couldn't resell it for more than what inflation had increased. So it basically was, you were the owner of the place, but it kind of took it out of sort of the market in a sense, and just you could keep with inflation. I really like that idea. The other one was, yeah, the city taking on the role of building and then managing rental housing, and I'm seeing like in our community economy we are facing an issue where there's not enough rentals, and it's like affecting like us filling positions not only at the city, but I think we've got a shortage across the board of people able to move here to work because it's just so darn expensive. And I am concerned that what our current deployment of resources isn't going to keep up with it, you know, outside of some very large economic catastrophe happening. I think that the general migration is here, and it's of a demographic, well, it is a mixed demographic, but we're going to be facing shortage of people being able to work. So I'm curious, it seems like the Nanaimo Affordable Housing Society is a development corporation per se. It's a non-profit style. Are there ways that our municipality could get more involved, or something that we can investigate in taking a bit more of an active role in that sort of development process, either in greater partnership with the nonprofit infrastructure that we already have set up, or look at potentially developing sort of our own pathway? Is that something that we could go down that rabbit hole a little bit and investigate?
Yes, through the chair to Councillor Gesbrock. Council, I think, has these options to consider and direct us. Our job would be to come back to you and look at the different benefits of different models. So right now we have a housing legacy fund. We use that to seed and support nonprofits taking steps to develop affordable housing. And the pros and cons of whether you go the route of something like Vancouver or Whistler or a bigger municipality would have to be looked at, and I think weighed up, and our job would be to come to you with that information, and then you direct us how you'd wish to proceed. to see what makes most sense in our context as a smaller municipality in terms of what the implications are tax-wise, in terms of the outcomes. And then we also have our partnerships with BC Housing and so forth to consider. So it's not a light undertaking, but it's certainly one that I think we would have to, with your direction, come back with an evaluation of the different options. Right now, we have the Housing Legacy Fund that we're using that could be built on, but that's very different than establishing a separate housing corporation. I'm not sure if Mr. Lindsay has any other thoughts or anybody else here, but that's my.
Great, and just following up on that, I see, you know, BC Housing is playing a bit of a role in that area. There's an Nanaimo Affordable Housing Society. It's like there are different groups, like there's this need that we need to like address, but it's like there's multiple groups trying to like work on it, and I'm just like, well, a greater level of like shared coordination could maybe like reduce sort of the resourcing costs on doing it, but have a bit more of a systematic approach, but something that maybe we can explore.
Councilor Thorpe has his hand up. So okay, we
Yep.
go to him first and then back to you. Thank you. Councilor Thorpe.
Thank you very much, Chair. Excuse me. You know, basically, I can support most of these ideas, but I must express a couple of reservations and concerns I have, and that is related to, in a couple of cases, removing decision-making power from the elected officials and putting it all in the hands of staff. And I totally trust and respect our staff, but councillors are elected to represent citizens, and councils change, and I think there is still a role for council to make decisions on things like zoning and related matters to where housing goes and what type of housing. And the second thing I'll point to, sort of related to that, is taking away the voice of neighborhoods or citizens to be heard via public hearing regarding things like the Victoria suggestion of missing middle, which my understanding was thrown out there and received such a backlash that they have now backed away from that. So I think it deserves a lot more careful consideration before we just say that we're going to arbitrarily zone places or areas of the city without having citizens have ability to comment on that. We didn't appreciate it when Island Health did that and the government did that to us a few years back. I don't think citizens would appreciate City Council doing the same thing. Thanks.
Thanks, Councilor Thorpe. Was there a question there or just a comment?
No, just a comment, but I hope it's a valid one.
Yep, thank you. And now back to Councilor Kesselbach.
Great, thank you. This next question is around the rental-only zoning. I know that this is something discussed. It sounds like it is in our proposed city plan. My question is that, I think in the last few years, just the way that the market has been, and because there's been such a huge shortage in rental only, in rentals, there's been, financial demand to be able to do this. I don't know with the change in construction costs and if this market is going to switch, but I do have concern that the way that the market works, or just how things have been set up and the regulations around it, that it doesn't keep up with the ratio of rental properties that are needed just to keep, functioning economy. We need a certain amount of rentals for groups in that demographic, and that's necessary to make sure that we've got people, that are able to provide this different services in the community. And so, I don't think it's going to provide it's going to help. It's a policy that's going to help us create the rentals right away that we need. There's probably other more effective policies, but I'm just curious, getting this in place, is it something that will allow a bit of more stability long term in terms of ensuring that there is a certain availability of rentals going forward, and has that been effective in other communities?
Okay, I'm looking to my left and my right in case somebody else wants to respond. This is one that it's about securing it into the future, and also creating those zones so that it's clear what the expectation is. And if you'll notice, the wording from in the draft city plan is actually, it reflects the direction in the affordable housing strategy that was brought forward, and it's about considering. So we would be coming back to council with the consideration of that. So like many of the different things that you're going to see, it's the words are review, consider, so that we can evaluate the pros and cons of how you do this. So it can be a range of things, including requiring certain areas up to 100% or a portion of a building to be secured for rental use only. So it doesn't mean that exclusively in a zone. There's different options, I guess is what I'm trying to say, that we have the opportunity to review and come back to you with. And through the Chair to Councillor Gasselberg, it is about both attracting it, the creation, and also securing it into the future. That being said, without rental-only zoning, we have had a tremendous amount of rental development in the city, and as Mr. Holmes and Mr. Lindsay can see. So again, the market has seen the need and has responded without us specifically doing that. So I thought I'd just point that out. Don't know if Mr. Lindsay or Mr. Holmes has anything to add.
The only thing I'd add through your chair is, through the chair, I think listening to the discussion, and it's exactly why we'd want to go away and explore all of these. There's pros and cons to every single one of these items, and each of them can be debated. The idea of having zoning limited to only apartments, I'm sure there's pros and cons, but there'll be a number of people who will note, well, you can pre-zone land, but if it doesn't make sense at the time, economic sense, it'll just sit there. People won't do it. And they'll say, well, at the same time, if you let us build stratify buildings, a certain number of those will probably end up being rental units. They'll be in the rental market. They're not recognized in our rental vacancy by CMHC, but they are definitely a form of rental that's in the community. There's still units that are brought on board. And there are, and this is kind of the more in-depth we'll get into, if we look at those things, there are other tools that council has in order to ensure that existing apartment buildings remain apartment buildings, including you have a policy around strata conversion. So if vacancy rates remain low, your policy is that we would not strata convert those. So the approving officer would not create condo units out of existing apartment buildings. So that's one of many tools you have. But all of these require further discussion, and bringing forward the pros and cons of each would be part of staff's work.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
And we, before you go on, Councillor Martin would like to speak.
Thank you.
I don't know how to...
We've got a list up there of affordable housing ideas from other municipalities, but we also have a recommendation that lists, my understanding is these are the options that if council supports, that we would be looking at exploring or getting further reports, such as developing a tenant relocation policy to require tenant relocation plans, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm just thinking, I'd like to actually move the recommendation.
Moved by Councillor Martman, second by Councillor Hammonds. Discussion.
And I'm just saying, I know that there was a lot of discussion about what is occurring in other municipalities. I think that's going to be brought back to us. That's incorporated, but really the discussion I'm thinking we want to have today is about these options that they're looking at exploring that will help look at initiatives and projects to be considered for 2023.
So, Councillor Gasselberg, have you got more points to make?
I just wanted to speak to this.
To the motion? Okay, yeah, go ahead.
It didn't get turned off after I was done.
I didn't turn it off, no. Did you have any?
Yeah, you can turn it off, yeah.
I can turn you off now, okay. And Councillor Martman's finished. Anybody wish to speak to the motion? Mayor Krog.
Thank you, Chair, and if I may, it's a sensible step forward. It's not controversial, and it represents a commitment by the city to continue doing what we can for the population who we know is struggling to find affordable housing across this community. well, indeed across this country for that matter. So I'm highly supportive of it and trust it will pass. Thank you.
And Councillor Geselbrecht.
Thanks, Chair. Through you to staff. So this motion is basically to proceed with the bulleted points A to I. Does that include further investigating some of those points that other municipalities are doing, or does that require further motion from council to create a report back? Or
through the chair to Councillor Geselbrecht, you'll notice in attachment A of the report that we've gone through and we've looked at the different municipalities, the different things that other municipalities are doing, taking a look at how they align or don't align with what we're doing. And based on that, we came up with this list here. You'll notice a couple of them are things you've already endorsed and we're just kind of reconfirming with you. So that was the approach that we took. If there's something additional there that you'd like to see, it could be added to this motion here.
So a question, just I'm trying to find the wording in the points, but there was the bulleted point about us going into, after the OCP has been passed, looking at those areas which we would sort of pre-zone based on the maximum within the OCP. Is that captured within those bulleted points?
Through the chair to Councillor Geselbrecht, you'll see, and it's spelled out a little in more detail on your agenda package on page 60 of Ms. Brinkman's report. Would you like to speak to it?
Great. I just missed seeing that point. I just want to check. Thank you.
Next, we have Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Chair. I'm in support of the move forward here, and I certainly like the idea. I would like to see that it proceeds faster than possibly things have proceeded in the past. And some of the things like pre-zoning, I think that could be something that would be first on our list, and because it's basically yes, no, okay, pre-zone. So if the services exist and it's part of the OCP, which we're just in the process of changing now, then why not just go through the process and get it done? I don't think everybody here is opposed to the concept. I would like to see also more emphasis on how we can do infill. And I'd like to ask a hypothetical question, and probably to Jeremy, if anybody. In the event that someone came to you with a building permit for a house or an apartment building, or say a secondary house carriage on a lot, and that building permit was approved and the person got their permit, could they, in theory, next day bring the exact same building back and say, I also have a lot right beside the one here, same size, everything else, here's my building permit application, same house? Could they not, in theory, get a building permit that afternoon? And I know there's issues here, but in theory, if there's nothing changed, what would stop them from getting a building permit almost immediately?
Thank you. Through Chair to Councillor Bonner's question. So realistically, I mean, it is another permit application. We'd have to look at the specifics of the parcel next door. We do deal with spec built homes regularly in the community that are a standard format and subject to the servicing requirements of the lot, whether or not it's a new lot that's just been freshly serviced, and we know we have all the information needed to support the application, that type of thing. Those progress through this through the permitting approval process fairly quickly. It's not going to be the next afternoon, obviously, but we do look at right now for single residential homes, we're in this 4 to 6 week range for approvals. So that's for a spec built home or something like that meets all the code requirements. So yeah, it's not going to be the next day. I mean, it's a matter of the resources that we have and the volume that we have and the ability to do that full review. There's obviously access considerations, servicing, all of that needs to be reviewed, but those do happen fairly rapidly with a standard application that meets all the code requirements. That currently happens today on many of the infill subdivisions that you'll see around town.
So I'm in doing some research on this. There's other municipalities that the city actually has plans, and if you decide to go to the city and say, "I'll give you $600. Here's a plan. It's already been pre-approved, and here's your building permit as long as you have a legitimate contractor willing to do the job for you," and those are sort of like already approved sort of thing in terms of building permits. The idea here is these would be infill jobs, like is we have this lot and we just want to build a house, and we've had a lot of folks come to us, individuals, you know, elderly folks that just want to build a couple places as income for their retirement, that sort of thing. So can we look at, while we're doing this work, look at this concept of here, if you want to buy this thing from the city, and it comes completely with a building permit as long as you have a legitimate contractor on this list, and your lot size is this size, then it works. Because I believe Vernon does this, or some other cities do this, right? There's a package sort of thing. So I'd like to see us go down that road. I'm not expecting you to say yay or nay today, but at least is to look at that option going forward is in the work you're doing. And I guess if I may.
We're okay.
Sure. The other thing is, can we prioritize this list here? Like I don't know if B is all that necessary, and I could ask Ms. Blakeman if she thinks she needs more education on housing as a housing provider, on the ways that the city supports affordable housing, because I think most of them out there kind of know what they're doing. But I could be wrong. So I'd rather we have a short meeting once this decision is made, is prioritize which one of these and which ones we can knock off really quickly. I'm all about low-hanging fruit type stuff and just get it off the plate and move on to something here. So.
Through the chair to Councillor Bonner, when we proposed these, we didn't propose them in any priority order. And I just wanted to clarify, what you've got is a shortened version of what's in your report. So the education was to developers, single homeowners, things where we're finding people may be new to the community, may not know of all the different options and incentives we have, and that we really want them to maximize. So whether it's legalizing a secondary suite if they're new to town and want to find out how they can also do laneway or coach houses. So it's not to the likes of Ms. Blakeman, who are quite seasoned, but to others who may be new to our community. And again, the prioritization, I think council could direct us to do that today.
Thank you.
Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. I agree with most. I do struggle with D, and I would like to see a number attached to that for how many units? Like, is it 1,000? Is it 1,500? I think that's a concern for me, but it's obviously just to develop a plan, so it would have to come back to council for approval. And my other one I really struggle with is number I. I did participate in the public hearing questionnaires, as well as was interviewed for, I think, 2 hours on it. And then I read the results of the study where I think it was 85 or 90% were opposed to not having public hearings. So I think that's something we really need to look at, and I would encourage you to look at the study that was done, because it was the very exhaustive one for the government, and the public was very much opposed to not having hearings. And one of the main reasons why is when you do your official community plan, nowhere in your plan are you addressing affordable housing in their area. So really, it doesn't fall in line with what they believe to be. So there was a lot of issues around that. I mean, again, it's just to evaluate, so I'm going to be voting in support of everything. But those are just points that I'm concerned about. And then to Councillor Geselbrecht's point about Whistler, which was a great initiative, the difference there is that they had their own charter at the time, so they were allowed to do that, and we wouldn't be allowed to based on the Local Government Act and Community Charter. That was the big difference. Whistler did have their own community charter at the time, which they don't anymore. It was removed.
Thank you, Councillor Armstrong. Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to support the recommendations and just want to extend my gratitude. I think this conversation was what I was really aiming for with this GPC. What are we doing? What are we doing well? What could we be doing differently? So this is great. 2 questions. One is, my understanding is that we're already doing with city plan a form of exclusionary, or removing exclusionary zoning through that DP8 form and character guideline, we're actually saying you can, without having to go to development permit, you can go directly to building permit for fourplexes or fewer. Now, a question, does that mean that in certain neighborhoods of single-family homes, a single-family house could be knocked down and 4 units put on that lot without the neighborhood having input on that?
Through the chair, it really depends on the neighborhood and what the existing zoning is. So for the vast majority of what we think of our residential neighborhoods, they have single family zoning, which allows generally a house and a suite on every property in the city, generally. But we do have neighborhoods that are zone multifamily, for example. So some of the older established neighborhoods I can think of that are kind of adjacent to the downtown that may have multifamily zoning. So in that situation, in those areas where that zoning exists, if council goes ahead with that bylaw, what will happen is exactly as you mentioned, someone could come in and proceed directly to a building permit for a fourplex. So there'd be no development permit review, no design panel review. And it is consistent with previous steps council has taken in the past with removing works and services requirements for fourplexes, all about trying to encourage in those areas. But no, it doesn't mean necessarily a fourplex on every single family lot. It would be on those areas of the community that are zoned for multifamily already.
Great, thank you. And my last question, if I may, is the piece that's missing for me in all of this is our acquisition strategy, because that's the strategy that's telling us how we're going to spend the money. And we've just established that we're going to be increasing the allocation to the Housing Legacy Reserve, which provides us with that opportunity to fund supportive housing or whatever, or purchase land, et cetera, et cetera. So is the acquisition strategy coming forward? Is that something that council will have some opportunity to wrestle with in the context of these new directions?
Through the chair to Councillor Hemmings, yes, with our work through Mr. Corson, who's overall looking at it's being considered as part of all our acquisitions. So coming back to council, it will you'll have an opportunity to comment on the approach that will likely be informed by all of these pieces and their support for this again in the proposed city plan.
Wonderful, thank you. And I remembered, I'm sorry, Chair, a question related to the earlier question that I forgot to ask. And what is the time saved by not having to go through the development permit process and going straight to building permit? Will that really incentivize developers? Is that lengthy and costly? And is this really a leg up?
Through the chair to Councillor Hemmings' question. So the currently it is possible to run development permit and building permit concurrently. Depending if there are no variances requested in the exemption to the development permit requirements that's put forward is assuming that no variances are required. It was the idea being that further review is appropriate through design panel if variances are requested. So if a project is consistent with the zoning and parking bylaw, for instance, no variance is requested, it does, I guess it reduces the amount of information and the separate process that a developer has to go through to do a development permit process. So there's going to be some cost saving and some time saving. It's difficult to project to project to determine exactly what that is. The time would be largely on the part of the consultants preparing the work, although much of that work can be applied to the building permit application as well. But it is removal of a barrier, or at least a perceived barrier, and some amount of time that's spent going through that design approval process for projects that are landing on property that's zoned for those smaller infill developments, the 3 and 4 unit developments, and they're not asking for variances from the bylaws that apply. So I can't put an exact dollar figure, but or percentage even wise, but there's definitely some cost and time savings to developers as well. Mr. Lindsay mentioned that the council has previously already exempted those scale of developments from providing frontage improvements such as sidewalks and street lighting and that type of work as well. So it's just an additional savings, and we are seeing definitely an uptick on those types of those are the ground-oriented type developments that were mentioned previously, that we've seen a bit of a lag on, but between the market where the pressure is on single-family prices, the affordability aspect, the demand for family housing, and the fact that the city has significant pre-zoned land that meets that infill need. We think that there's going to be a fair amount of uptake in that, and it definitely responds to a demand in the market that I think will help attract and provide housing for families as well. So I think it's an important sector. Any improvement, any time savings and cost savings will help. Thanks.
All done, Councillor Higgins?
Thank you.
Councillor Geselbrecht.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, just in terms of the point, there was sort of like in the existing, what other municipalities are doing, there was the section that under the heading, provision of land and financing through funds and corporations, and this is sort of the housing development corporation, sort of that kind of fell under the different strategies. From that column, is there strategies reflected in these, and I couldn't find them in these proposed projects for 2023 that would fit under there? And if there isn't, either we can pass this motion with these particular ones, but I think I would like to consider further exploration of exploring options to increase our ability to increase, non-market affordable housing through that provision of land and financing through funds and corporations as an additional point of exploration. First a question, is it captured at all in any of these points?
Through the chair to Councillor Geselbrecht, it's not actually in this proposed project listing for 2023, but it also relates a little bit to the acquisition strategy that Councillor Hemmons was also talking about, because that kind of covers under both. So,
absolutely, yeah, thank you. I think there is an ecosystem that is developed and it's been part of our community for a long time. I think it's just been under-resourced for the development of non-market affordable housing. And I think that we need to increase the resourcing of it. And it may not be the city jumping fully in with its own housing development corporation, but it could be a way of increasing our support for what is currently already out there, or looking, farther down the line of modifying how it's organized in some capacity. But I think that we should start beginning that ball rolling. And so I've got either a proposed amendment, or I'd be happy just to pass an additional motion after we get this one done, not to make it less complicated.
And Chair, just a thought to Councillor Geselbrecht, if we're coming back with the proposed property acquisition piece of it and that kind of a strategy, I'm wondering if it better fits into that meeting, and staff could perhaps bring back options for this, the point that you're talking about, which is land and financing through funds and corporations, that bullet.
I think
as part of that discussion, or you can include I do a subsequent motion after this one.
Okay, yeah, I think I'll put a subsequent motion on. I think the acquisition is a piece of that, but it's one piece of sort of a more fulsome exploration. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Geselbrecht. I have one question with regard to the develop a tenant relocation policy. And my question is, because I'm thinking this is going to cost whoever, whether it's a nonprofit or a for-profit development, is going to add costs to that, which is going to be passed along at some point. And I guess my question is, has there been any request for input from the development community, either nonprofit or otherwise, about the viability of this?
Through the chair to the chair. Because we haven't explored this option as yet, that would be part of the conversation. And for council's information, this is a strategy that's starting to be used in other municipalities. And so we thought it was worth exploring as people face potential renovictions on a larger scale. But the important thing to note is for bigger like mobile home parks and rentals of 4 or more units. So not with smaller. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Oh, Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Chair. In our Health and Housing Task Force, we identified better part of 1,800 people who are at risk of becoming homeless or are in housing that's not suitable. And I'm not so much agreeing that we need a housing development corporation. I think we have a lot of agencies around here that do probably a better job than we would. Certainly me, anyway. But I'm wondering, of those 1,800, and I listen to the mayor all the time, right? When he says we don't build housing, and I don't necessarily agree with him, but I listen to him. But we do supplements, rent supplements. And for the cost of a 1%, and this is going to go over well, 1% tax increase, we can provide housing supplements for 300 people at $300 a month. And if we did it again, we'd have a supplement for 600 people, which means we don't have to build a whole bunch of affordable housing because we just made their housing affordable. And so I'm wondering if that is something else we could look up, is increasing the amount of our subsidies that we're giving out through the Health and Housing our funding. And that would basically allow us to keep people in houses that they can now afford or at that point without having to build them more. So I'm just throwing that out. No, there's no motion or anything. It's just something what you might want to consider down the road.
I think it's important to note, and I think you've heard today about the money that the city puts in for rent supplements, but also recognizing that BC Housing does the same. And one of the things that we've been talking to BC Housing in an updated MOU, housing MOU, would be to formalize that in a way to recognize what they're putting in and what the city's putting in. So I think there's an opportunity to have that discussion through that process, but I don't want to give yourselves or the community the impression that there's only 51 people receiving rental supplements in the city. Those are the ones that council's supporting, but there's far more behind that BC Housing supporting. But I think you're absolutely right. It is an effective tool to make sure that people are able to stay in the housing they have. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, seeing no further speakers, and I don't see a hand up for Councillor Thorpe. The motion is on the floor. All in favor? Opposed? Looks like Councillor Thorpe, I didn't see yea or nay. Sorry, I wasn't watching.
He was in favor.
In favor. They're unanimous then. Thank you. And Councillor Gasselberg, did you want to bring a subsequent motion or a notice of motion?
I'd just like to move that staff add to the proposed projects for 2023 to explore options to increase local capacity for the development of non-market affordable housing through the provision of land and financing through funds and corporations.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Hammonds? Did you wish to discuss?
I'll speak to it really quick. I think that a lot of this we're doing in some part. There's the Housing Legacy Reserve Fund. We've provided land for various projects. So, Tutuxton comes to mind. And I think that we've got an ecosystem, with the Nanaimo Affordable Housing Society, and that are developing affordable non-market housing. However, I think that, with some additional thought, we could maybe formalize a little bit more how we're doing that and increase capacity in that sense. I don't know what that would look like, but there are, the Capital Region, City of Victoria, Cowichan Valley, Whistler, Kelowna, Port Alberni, City of Campbell River are all implementing programs that are, addressing this in similar vein. But I think that there is a huge gap in this, and I don't believe that the market is set up to be able to address it. And without, further exploration, I think that we're just going to continually see a widening gap in terms of the housing that we need to sort of kind of run a healthy economy here in Nanaimo. So I'd like further exploration on that. Thanks.
Ms. Gurry, would you mind rereading that? Because I'm not sure I got it all.
I might have to get Councillor
I can reread it,
Gesselbrock.
yeah.
Yes, because I got most of it, but thank you.
So basically, it's just adding an additional bullet point so that staff add to the proposed projects for 2023 to explore options to increase local capacity for the development of non-market affordable housing through the provision of land and financing through funds and corporations.
So if I could ask a question just for clarification, so I can understand the land, but I'm struggling a bit with funds. Does that mean we're going to be mortgage holders, or just what is the intention there?
Do you asking me a question?
Yeah.
So can you repeat that question again?
Sure. I understand the part about land, but I'm having trouble when you're referring to financing. I forget the exact word you use, but it of course brings up in my mind the issue of mortgage holders. In other words, we're going to be putting out mortgage funds for development of these facilities, or am I misunderstanding this altogether?
Basically, just with the resources that a city has and funding that's available, we have land, we've got abilities with our zoning and development processes, we can lower the cost of development so that units can be sold or rented to people cheaper than what the market can provide.
I get that, but my concern is how much is it going to cost the city with regard, in other words, if we have somebody coming seeking a grant for $1 million to make a development, is that kind of where you're heading, or is that?
Basically, where I'm heading is like getting people together and well organized to come up with an idea of how to lower the cost of development with the resources that are available so that we can provide lower rent and lowerable cost for housing through non-market instruments. And so I think that I don't know exactly what form that can take. I mean, Nanaimo Affordable Housing's been doing a lot of that. We do it to some extent, but there's numerous strategies that it can be on a small project basis. It could be sort of some larger thing. I'm not sure, but I'd just like that further explored. Thank you.
Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. Is that actually not covered in G, which you chose not to put on your proposed projects, which is provisions of land and financing through funds and corporations?
Your chair, through you to Councillor Armstrong, yeah, that is the one that was not included, which is why Councillor Gesselbrock's making a subsequent motion.
But I'm asking why it wasn't included.
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear that part.
Through the chair to Councillor Armstrong, this is just a list of what other municipalities are doing.
No, but you didn't include G. That's why I'm asking, was there a reason why you did not include it?
Through the chair to Councillor Armstrong, I think there was a whole host of different proposed projects for 2023, and I know that was noted in the affordable housing strategy. It's also brought forward in the proposed city plan. So I think that this was included to kind of maybe expand other options that weren't in those two documents.
So then what you're saying, then Councillor Gesselbrock's motion really is moot?
Through the chair, it's a matter of what your priorities are. We were looking at what we thought we could achieve in 2023 and what we could practically do. And so if you wish to see this put on the table, then we'll see how that weighs with what we've got there.
Thank you. I won't be voting in favor of the motion because of what staff had said. And when I look at all the stuff that is already being done on that, I don't think it's a priority right now versus the others, especially with staff capacity. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Armstrong. Councillor Hammonds.
Chair, I'm looking at G in the review of affordable housing initiatives from other municipalities, and the difference that we don't do is that we don't have a development corporation. That seems to be the only thing. So my question for Councillor Gesselbrock is, are you asking staff to just explore a development corporation to kind of mobilize some of the things that we're seeing in this report?
I think that I'm looking at one, beginning that conversation. It may be a dead end, and there might be a lot of good reasons why we don't go down that route. But I'm also looking at, from what we are doing, how can we enhance the development of affordable non-market housing? Are there other things that we can be doing to enhance that in our relationship with the nonprofit actors that are operating with BC Housing? A lot of things we are already doing, but just more intentional focus on how do we shore up our operations. And it could be that we're doing absolutely everything that we can outside of starting up our own development corp, and I think that would be useful to council to go happen, because we might get to the point and be like, you know what, we aren't meeting the bar. We've done all these different things. We've got a housing legacy fund. We've got these, you know, what we're doing with pre-zoning, and despite all our efforts, we're not reducing the vacancy rate. We're not producing the threshold of housing. We need to get serious about maybe taking this in-house and doing a development corp. But I think that we need to be having that question in our heads as we go through all these other steps. And I think that this motion is just, let's have that question in our minds and look at, you know, are there things that we can be optimizing in our operations without going into the housing corp route? Or have we hit a threshold where it's like, we're not going to see any more gains unless we sort of take something more fully on? That's kind of how I'm looking at it.
May I respond?
Sure.
So I'm going to vote in favor, but I feel like that's what staff gave us today. They gave us, this is what we're doing. We're kind of doing everything we can, and short a development corp. And I'm hearing that a development corp isn't the silver line. It's not, you know, the gold standard. It's something that we could consider that would enable us to, you know, maybe move in a different direction on a few of these things. But I feel like staff have answered that question today through this conversation and report. However, I'll support. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Hemmons. So next we have Councillor Thorpe, followed by Mayor Krog.
Thank you, Chair. So I was happy to support the list of initiatives recommended by staff, who gave a fulsome rationale and background. I tend to agree with Councillor Armstrong on this. I don't see it as being necessary. I think it's being covered off, and you know, it's a motion which I feel is basically unnecessary, and it's a motion on the fly that really requires, I think, more thought and background before I can support it. So I don't see it as a priority, and I will not vote for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thorpe. Mayor Krog.
Thank you very much, Chair. Councillor Brown and I have had discussions with Dave Whitty, who's very familiar with the Development Corporation in the city of Winnipeg. There are various models. It is quite complex. It is a big project to study. Quite candidly, as much as it has appeal, and we're in the midst of a housing crisis, which is never the time to do anything terribly innovative. You should have done it ahead of time so you avoided the crisis. However, I honestly think, and I'm with Councillor Armstrong on this one, as much as it has appeal, and I've looked a bit into it, and I find it intriguing, I'm just not prepared in the quote-unquote final few months of this particular council, and having looked at that list for staff already and appreciating where they are in terms of their burden, not prepared to add to it. It would be, in my view, a reasonably substantive undertaking to explore this in a way that would produce a report that would be useful for council, which would be worthy of consideration and provide us the necessary information to make what could be a very important decision. I just, if Councillor Gesselbrock comes back and brings this in November, I might well support it in the circumstances when we see where, quote unquote, the economy is, where the state of the city is, and all of those things. But I'm just, and it's for that reason only, I'm just not prepared, as I say, to burden staff at this time with this concept, because it is a big concept. It is not undertaken by every municipality, and I just don't think I can agree to burden staff with it at this point, and it's for that reason I won't support it.
Thank you, Mayor Krog. Councillor Marvin.
Thank you, and I'll try and keep it brief. I understand the concept of why we would be supporting it, and it's actually for housing corporations, not just corporations, period. But I also look to our new systems planning organization, and I think when that's up and running, I would anticipate that they would be looking at all these approaches as well. So at this time, I won't support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Martman, anybody further? Seeing none, all those in favor? We have Councilor Gesbrook, Councilor Hammonds, and opposed. We have Councilor Armstrong, Councilor Martman, Councilor Turley, Councilor Bonner, Mayor Thorpe, sorry, and Mayor Krog, and Councilor Thorpe. You notice I didn't use my name on it. So the motion fails. Okay, now, question period. I assume there's no questions? Yes, Councilor Bonner.
Thank you, Chair. It was actually a question to an earlier thing I didn't have an opportunity to ask. Is regarding short-term rentals. The bylaw's been passed, everything else. I'm just wondering, when we started looking at this, there was roughly 300 homes that were on various short-term rental websites that this bylaw basically made probably the vast majority of them not legal. So I was wondering how we're making out on that. Because I noticed that we have a number of applications, and these would be obviously ones that can be getting done. How are we making headway on the ones that aren't supposed to be there?
Through the chair to Councillor Bonner. So this came into place April 1st. So there's been a pretty good uptake. 80 so far that have been approved. And we have not taken the approach of doing, perhaps the wrong word is a hunt to find those who are not in compliance. So we're starting off with a voluntary approach. And I think our job is to then monitor it and see, is it, much like secondary suites and other things, is it something where we respond on a complaint basis, where there's a clear issue versus spending quite finite and valuable staff resources trying to shut things down. And maybe I'll defer to Mr. Home and Mr. Lindsay to see if they have anything to add.
Your Worship, I think, or sorry, to the chair, I think exactly what Ms. Popal saying, we're in very early days of the bylaw and we've had a number of people come forward and comply. You will recall when we did bring it forward, there was some discussion about whether we wanted to go ahead and engage one of these companies that do monitoring for you. They are out there and they monitor the platforms and make sure people are brought into compliance. We decided to defer that. I believe there may or may not have been a motion, but certainly the intent was to give it about a year of having the bylaw in place and then come back and do a review. So we'll continue that monitoring and report back, but that's always, that will always be an option available to council.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Bonner. Any other business? Well, I just wanted to say something first. So,
speech.
Thank you for your indulgence this afternoon with my fumbling of different techniques and apparently not purposely ignoring councillors, but thank you for your forgiveness. Now you can. Motion to adjourn by Councillor Martman and the seconder, Mayor Krog. I got it right this time. All in favor? Carried. Thank you.